Chapter 321. Puzzled as to why Shao Chen and the other king of geniuses would appear here, Shao Chen did not explain too much in the face of the Tao-querying realm warrior's question. He just said calmly, "The battle at the Skylock formation has ended. All the demonic cultivator geniuses have been annihilated. These 4 are the personal disciples of the demon saint and have been captured by us. Alright, time is of the essence. We came here mainly to buy some healing elixirs and to borrow some flying demonic beasts." He directly stated his purpose for coming. They had come to Southern Pass City to borrow some flying demonic beasts and to buy some healing elixirs. Hearing Shao Chen's words, the Tao-querying realm warrior was stunned. The battle at the Skylock formation had ended? And all the demonic cultivator geniuses had been annihilated. Not only that, Shao Chen and the others had captured 4 personal disciples of the demon saint alive? This was simply unimaginable. It should be known that the other battlefronts had yet to have a winner. Unexpectedly, the Southern Wind Region battlefront was the first to have a result. Facing the demonic cultivator geniuses, Shao Chen and the others had actually won a complete victory. Surprised and overjoyed at the same time, the Tao-querying realm warrior was stunned for a moment. He hurriedly gestured respectfully to Shao Chen and the others and said, "King of Geniuses, please. I'll have someone prepare the healing elixirs. However, there are no more flying demonic beasts in Southern Pass City. We can only transfer some from the nearby cities. It will take some time." "Alright, hurry up. We don't have much time to stay here." Hearing this, Shao Chen said calmly. Under the lead of this Tao-querying realm martial artist, Shao Chen and the rest entered Southern Pass City. Due to the urgency of the war, the supply of flying demonic beasts was in short supply. Every battlefield required a large number of flying demonic beasts. Hence, Southern Pass City did not have any flying demonic beasts. They could only transfer them from the nearby cities. According to the words of this Tao-querying realm martial artist, the fastest they would need was 2 to 4 hours. 2 to 4 hours was not too long. Moreover, Shao Chen and the others had no other choice, so they could only choose to wait. They went directly to the central hall of Southern Pass City. Along the way, many citizens of Southern Pass City had heard that Shao Chen and the others had defeated the demonic cultivator geniuses. Everyone swarmed over and gathered on both sides of the road. They looked at Hao Tian and the others and discussed in low voices. "Are these the demonic cultivator geniuses? I was wondering how capable they were, but they were still captured by our king of geniuses. To Southern Pass City. The Southern Wind Region is safe." Shao and the others. To An and the others to the Central Hall. Shao and the others. Hao and the others of the Tao cultivators. They did not have to wait for long before the Tao-querying realm warrior from before came back with the healing elixirs. He could tell that the injuries on Shao Chen and the others were not light, and many of them were old injuries. It would not be easy to heal them, so the Tao-querying realm warrior was not stingy with the healing elixirs. He brought almost all the better healing elixirs in the entire Southern Pass City. Shao Chen did not stand on ceremony. He took them all and distributed the elixirs to everyone. He swallowed the elixir in one gulp. He did not know how long it had been since he had last tasted a healing elixir. As the elixir entered his stomach, it was as if a clear stream had melted in his body. An indescribable feeling of comfort quickly spread throughout his body. It was as if rain had suddenly come to the earth after a long drought. As he refined the elixir, Shao Chen looked at the Tao-querying realm cultivator and asked, "How is the situation on the other battlefronts?" In any case, they had nothing to do now. They had to wait for the flying demon beasts to arrive before they could set off. In that case, they might as well ask about the situation on the other battlefronts. After all, Shao Chen and the others were unable to communicate with the outside world while they were within the Heavenlock formation. They did not know what the situation on the other battlefronts was like. The Tao querying realm cultivator's face sank when he heard Xiao Chen's question. A wisp of sorrow flashed through his eyes. Xiao Chen frowned slightly when he saw this. Just based on the Tao querying realm cultivator's expression, Xiao Chen guessed that the current situation was probably very bad. As expected, Xiao Chen and the others obtained an unacceptable truth from the Tao querying realm cultivator. In the short span of a few days, another ruler had fallen after the deaths of the barbaric beast ruler and the fist ruler. In just a short few days, Tao emperors had successively fallen. This outcome was difficult for the entire Heavenly Qin continent to accept. Of course, it wasn't just the Heavenly Qin continent that had fallen. The devil emperors on the side of the demonic cultivators had also fallen. As a result, there wasn't much of a difference in the number of Tao emperors on both sides. 3 sovereigns had fallen because they were too heavily injured. The atmosphere was slightly heavy. No one had expected the battle to be so intense that even sovereigns had begun to suffer casualties. The atmosphere in the hall instantly became extremely heavy. Over 2 hours later, the flying demon beasts arrived. Xiao Chen was the first to stand up and say in a serious tone, "It's time to set off." Now wasn't the time to grieve, nor did they have the time to be dejected. Since sovereigns had fallen, Xiao Chen and the others had to avenge them and drive the demonic cultivator army out of the Heavenly Qin continent. Only then would they be able to comfort their souls in heaven. When they heard Xiao Chen's words, everyone exchanged glances and stood up. They could clearly sense the flames of rage burning in their eyes. Xiao Chen was right. The sovereigns had fallen, and they were the ones who had inherited the sovereign's will. There was no extra time for them to weep bitterly. "Let's go," Guduwuya said indifferently. His expression returned to normal, but his eyes were abnormally cold. As soon as Guduwuya finished speaking, the kings of prides mounted their flying demon beasts and bowed to the Tao querying realm cultivator guarding Southern Pass City. Xiao Chen thanked him. "Thank you. Farewell." "Be careful, kings of prides." The Tao querying realm cultivator hurriedly returned Xiao Chen's bow. Without wasting any more words, the kings of pride soared into the sky on their flying demon beasts and quickly rushed towards the central divine region's front line with Hao Tian and the others. With the help of the flying demon beasts, the travel time was greatly reduced. If they rushed from Southern Pass City to Western Pass City and didn't rest along the way, it would take them at most 2 days to arrive. The kings of prides didn't speak much along the way. The deaths of the sovereigns were like mountains that pressed down on them. The sovereigns had already sacrificed their lives for the Heavenly Qin continent, and now it was Xiao Chen's turn. They hurried towards Western Pass City. As Xiao Chen's group hurried along, the battle didn't stop. Even though Tao emperors had already fallen, the battle between both sides was still extremely intense. As usual, fierce battles erupted on the central divine region's front line. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 322. As usual, the battle erupted on the central divine region's front, and all the Tao emperors were naturally locked in battle. An entire 6 Tao emperors from both sides had perished. But even then, it was still unable to allow the battle to catch a breather. As the 3 beast emperors of the Demon Beast Empire, the Lion Emperor and the other 2 were already riddled with injuries. "Bastard, die!" shouted the Demon Emperor, who was fighting the Lion Emperor. He threw a punch at the Lion Emperor. He could tell that the Lion Emperor wasn't in a good condition, so he didn't show any mercy. The Lion Emperor's eyes flashed with determination when he saw the Demon Emperor's attack. Up until now, every battle had been extremely dangerous. The slightest carelessness could lead to death. The Lion Emperor knew the state of his body, so he shouted loudly, "Everyone, I'm afraid I have to leave first." The ruler of the continent of the 9 clouds and the others heard him. The rulers didn't reply, but their eyes were filled with grief. They had heard such words many times in the past few days, and each time they heard such words, a Tao emperor had died. Everyone was very clearly aware that if they were truly unable to hold on until the end of the battle, then the final choice was to take their enemies down with them. They absolutely couldn't allow the gap between the Tao Emperor realm experts of both sides to be pulled apart, otherwise the entire situation of the battle would be overturned. Therefore, the rulers all made the same choice at the last moment. They wanted to drag someone down with them even if they were about to die. Just like the Tyrant Fist ruler and the other two, the Lion Emperor roared furiously and charged at the Demon Emperor in front of him. The power of his bloodline burned fiercely. His bloodline burned, and a red light quickly dyed the sky red. At the same time, the Lion Emperor and the Demon Emperor disappeared. Another two Tao Emperor realm experts had perished together. Up until this point in the battle, it could be said that Tao Emperor realm experts would appear every single time a battle erupted, and this had practically become a law. On the other hand, the Devil Emperors on the side of the Devil Cultivators were furious in their hearts as well. Every single one of these overlords of the Heavenly Star Continent are simply madmen. Even if they're going to die, they'll drag someone down with them. The Lion Emperor had perished. Another Tao Emperor had perished. This was already the fourth Tao Emperor from the Heavenly Chun Continent to perish. The battle continued. While the Central Divine Region was engaged in a fierce battle, Shao Chun and the others were also hurrying over. During these 2 consecutive days of time, all of them didn't stop for even a moment. After 2 days, they finally arrived at Western Pass City, and they saw the outline of the city from afar. However, Shao Chun noticed that the city walls were covered in white cloth, and his heart constricted. Could it be that another Tao Emperor realm expert has perished? They didn't give it any further thought and headed directly towards Western Pass City. Right when they were about to approach Western Pass City, a few Tao King realm experts appeared and obstructed the path of Shao Chen's group. The person in the lead shouted coldly, "Who's trespassing into Western Pass City?" He didn't see the appearance of Shao Chen's group clearly. When he heard this, Shao Chen replied, "Shao Chen from the 9 Firmaments Palace." He reported his identity. When he heard this, the Tao King realm expert in the lead looked towards Shao Chen's group. When he saw that it was actually the various geniuses, he hurriedly bowed and said, "So it's the various geniuses. Sorry for the offense." "It's fine. We want to enter the city to see the Lord Ruler," Shao Chun said indifferently in the face of this person's apology. They wanted to see the Lord Ruler. When he heard Shao Chen's words, the Tao King realm expert didn't refuse, and he didn't even report it. He directly led Shao Chen's group to the central Great Hall where the lords were. Shao Chen's group successfully arrived at Western Pass City. However, in the central Great Hall, the lords all had sorrowful expressions. After the Lion Emperor died 2 days ago, the Yao Beast Empire's other 2 Beast Emperors had also died in yesterday's battle. So far, a total of 6 Tao Emperors had died on the Heavenly Chun Continent's side. Only the Lords of the 9 Firmaments, the Heavenly Wood Ruler, the Myriad Weapons Ruler, the Sky-Burning Ruler, the Heavenly Pill Ruler, the Divine Talisman Ruler, the Heavenly Fate Ruler, and the Pill Cloud Ruler were still alive. Originally, there were 14 lords, but now, only 8 were left. The number of casualties was simply unimaginable. Moreover, the 9 Firmaments ruler and the others knew in their hearts that in the upcoming battle, there would definitely be more casualties. Until the battle ended, everything would never end. Just as the lords were grieving over the deaths of the 3 Beast Emperors, a Tao sovereign expert reported that Shao Chen's group of geniuses had arrived at Western Pass City. Hearing this, the lords immediately let them in. They already knew what had happened in the Great Sky Lock Formation through the sound transmission talisman. When they learned that Shao Chen's group had completely annihilated the demonic cultivator's geniuses, the lords were overjoyed. Now that they had safely arrived at Western Pass City, the lords could finally breathe a sigh of relief. Shao Chen led Hao Tian's group into the hall. When they saw the lords, they bowed respectfully and said, "Greetings, lords. It's good that you're back. You did well in the battle of the Great Skylock Formation. You completely annihilated the demonic cultivator's geniuses. Very good. In response to Xiao Chen's group's salute, the lords nodded and replied with gratification. The lords were very satisfied with the outcome of the battle of the Great Skylock Formation. Xiao Chen's group's performance could be said to be perfect. Hearing the lords' praise, Xiao Chen's group didn't feel too happy. On the way here, they already knew that after the three lords had fallen, the three beast emperors had also fallen in the past 2 days. The intensity of the battle was increasing by the day. If they didn't end this battle as soon as possible, more lords would probably fall. Thus, now wasn't the time to rejoice. They had to use Hao Tian's group of 4 to change the direction of the battle as soon as possible. It would be best if they could eliminate 1 or 2 demon emperors. If the number of Dao emperors on both sides could be pulled apart, their chances of victory would be much higher. Xiao Chen was about to explain his plan to the sovereigns, but before that, he spoke to Lin Nuo, Ancient Desolation, Gu Mu, and Long Qing. Go. Go and see your masters. We'll be fine here. The 3 lords and 3 beast emperors that had fallen were Lin Nuo's and the others' masters. When they learned that their masters had fallen, Lin Nuo's group of 4 had been filled with grief all along the way. Now that they had safely arrived at Western Pass City, Xiao Chen asked the 4 of them to pay a visit to their masters' memorial tablets and burn incense for them. As for here, Xiao Chen's group would deal with it. When they heard Xiao Chen's words, the 4 of them didn't refuse. They nodded slightly before turning around and leaving the hall. When he saw this, Chen Ling was the first to speak. I'll go accompany second sister. You should speak here. I'll go as well. In any case, there's no point in staying here. As soon as Chen Ling finished speaking, Guduwia spoke up. Then let's take these 4 fellows away first. Brother Xiao Chen, I'll have to trouble you to explain the plan to the lords, Huang Fu Ao said. Huang Fu Ao said after Guduwia finished speaking. Then, he and the others took Hao Tian and the others out of the palace. Everyone left one after another, and soon, only Xiao Chen remained in the hall. Begging for your collection, begging for your monthly votes, begging for your recommendation. Chapter 323. Xiao Chen was the only one left in the palace. After the other geniuses left, the ruler of the continent of the 9 clouds looked at Xiao Chen and asked, Xiao Chen, what's the plan? He didn't know Xiao Chen's plan, but when he heard the ruler of the continent of the 9 clouds, Xiao Chen didn't keep him in suspense. I want to use Hao Tian and the others to kill the demon emperors of the demon cultivators. Use Hao Tian and the others to kill the demon emperors of the demon cultivators? Asked the ruler of the continent of the 9 clouds. He didn't understand what Xiao Chen meant. Indeed, Hao Tian and the others are the demon saint's direct disciples. They have a very high social status among the demon cultivators. Now that we've captured them, I want to use their lives to threaten the demon emperors of the demon cultivators. Even if I can't make the demon emperors compromise, I can at least distract them. That way, Lord Ruler, you'll have an opportunity to kill them when they least expect it. As long as we can kill even one demon emperor, we'll have an advantage. Xiao Chen told the sovereigns about his plan without holding anything back. After hearing what Xiao Chen said, the sovereigns fell into deep thought. After a short while, the ruler of Tianji looked at Xiao Chen and said, using Hao Tian and the others to threaten the demon emperors is indeed a good idea. Xiao Chen's plan was indeed good. At least for now, there was no better way. During a great battle, they couldn't afford to be distracted. If they could use Hao Tian and the others to distract the demon emperors of the demon cultivators, the rulers would have a great chance to kill them. After all, the Dao emperors of the demon cultivators of both sides were severely injured. Under such circumstances, a small mistake could be fatal. The ruler of Tianji was the first to agree with Xiao Chen's plan. When the rulers of the continent of the 9 clouds heard him, they all nodded in agreement. At this point in time, there was no better way. Moreover, if they were really able to kill even a single Devil Emperor, then the number of Tao Emperors on both sides would be pulled apart, and the situation would be completely turned around. The gap between the Tao Emperor realm experts couldn't be underestimated. With another Tao Emperor realm expert amongst them, all the sovereigns would be able to join forces and annihilate the other Devil Emperors. In this way, their advantage would be ceaselessly enlarged, and they would have a chance to obtain victory in the end. The sovereigns all agreed with Xiao Chen's plan. In response, Xiao Chen said, "Don't worry. Then when the time comes, Lord Ruler, you only need to fight like normal. Immediately, we'll escort Hao Tian and the other three to the top of the city walls. Once a Devil Emperor is affected by Hao Tian and the other three, Lord Ruler, you'll immediately seize the opportunity to kill him." There was no need for the sovereigns to do anything. The sovereigns only had one mission, and that was to seize the opportunity. Once a Devil Emperor was affected by Hao Tian's group of 4, the sovereigns fighting against that Devil Emperor were to seize the opportunity and directly kill that Devil Emperor. All the sovereigns nodded slightly when they heard Xiao Chen. After that, Xiao Chen didn't stay in the hall for long because the sovereigns still had to recuperate and prepare for the next battle. So, it didn't take long for Xiao Chen to leave the hall as well. The plan had been carried out, and all the sovereigns had agreed. A Tao Querying Realm cultivator had been waiting for him since a long time ago when he left the hall. He led Xiao Chen to a small courtyard by the side of the hall, and this was their temporary residence. When Xiao Chen arrived at the courtyard, Huang Fu Ao and the others were already here. At the same time, Hao Tian's group of 4 were imprisoned here as well. Hao Tian's group was extremely important to Xiao Chen and the others, and they couldn't allow any mishaps to occur to them. So, the task of guarding them naturally had to be undertaken by Xiao Chen and the others. "Junior brother Lin Nuo and the others haven't returned yet?" Xiao Chen asked Huang Fu Ao after they entered the courtyard. "Not yet," Huang Fu Ao replied in response to Xiao Chen's question. Lin Nuo and the others were still in front of the Savage Beast Sovereign's memorial tablet. It was understandable that Lin Nuo and the others were grieving over their master's death. Even Long Qing was deeply saddened by the deaths of the 3 beast emperors. After glancing at the room where Hao Tian's group was imprisoned, Xiao Chen instructed Huang Fu Ao to watch over them properly. The sovereigns had already agreed to their plan, so Xiao Chen left with large strides. He didn't go to the memorial tablets of the Fist Tyrant Ruler and the others to pay his respects. Instead, he headed straight for the sovereign's memorial hall. Because the war wasn't over yet, the Fist Tyrant Ruler and the others' corpses hadn't been properly buried. They were all placed in the memorial hall. When Xiao Chen arrived, he saw Lin Nuo, Huang Fu Ao, Gu Mu, and Long Qing kneeling before the memorial tablets of the Fist Tyrant Ruler and the others. Without saying anything, Xiao Chen slowly walked up to the memorial tablets and respectfully lit incense sticks for the Fist Tyrant Ruler and the others. In the face of Xiao Chen's series of actions, Lin Nuo and the others didn't say a word. They knelt before their master's memorial tablets as if they had lost their souls, their eyes bloodshot. Having personally experienced the pain of losing a loved one, Xiao Chen understood that even if he tried to console them, Lin Nuo and the others wouldn't listen. After lighting the incense sticks for the Fist Tyrant Ruler and the others, Xiao Chen calmly said, "The Sovereign has already agreed to our plan. The Lord Sovereign has already agreed to our plan. The next battle will be the most crucial moment. If we can really use Hao Tian's group to kill the Devil Emperor, then we will be able to avenge the Tyrant Fist Sovereign and the others and comfort their souls in heaven." Without waiting for the 4 to reply, Xiao Chen walked out of the morning hall. Lin Nuo and the other 3 had a look in their eyes when they heard what Xiao Chen had said. A while after Xiao Chen left, Long Qing took the lead and kowtowed 3 times to the memorial tablets of the 3 demon emperors. Then he got up and left. Xiao Chen was right. Right now, the most important thing was to adjust their condition and prepare for the next battle. After Long Qing left, Lin Nuo and the others kowtowed 3 times to their respective masters. They said in unison, "If the master's spirit is in heaven, this disciple will definitely avenge you." Now that the plan had been approved by the rulers, the next battle would be the most crucial moment. It could be said that they had to give it their all. If they succeeded, the heavenly Chen continent would gain an absolute advantage and obtain the final victory. The 4 of them returned to their residences from the memorial hall. After a night of silence, at noon the next day, the demonic cultivator army attacked again. Along with the sound of war drums, experts soared into the sky from Western Pass City. Everyone was already used to this kind of battle, so the moment the war drums sounded, everyone was ready to meet the enemy. At the same time, Xiao Qin and the others gathered together. In front of everyone, Hao Tian and the others were tied up and kneeling on the ground. Xiao Qin glanced at everyone and said in a serious tone, "Everyone, success or failure will depend on today's battle. If we can successfully kill the demon emperors, our plan will be considered a success. Today's battle was a gamble. If the plan succeeded, then the outcome would be determined in advance. If it failed, then the ruler's death would obviously occur again. It was even uncertain whether the heavenly Chen continent would be able to survive in the end. Therefore, today's battle was extremely crucial. Everyone had no way out. Please collect, vote, recommend." Chapter 324. Today's battle could be said to be the most crucial battle since the start of the war. In particular, whether Xiao Chen's plan could be carried out smoothly or not was directly related to the outcome of the entire battle. Upon hearing Xiao Chen's words, everyone nodded heavily. Then, under the personal escort of the proud kings, the group walked towards the city wall of Western Pass City. It was the most conspicuous place from the battlefield, and it was also the place that attracted the attention of the demon emperors the most. Xiao Qin and the others rushed towards the city wall. At the same time, the armies of both sides had gathered outside Western Pass City. Accompanied by the shouts of numerous Dao sovereign experts, the 2 armies roared and charged at each other. "Kill!" Shouts of killing shook the heavens. The cultivators of both sides were completely enraged, and their attacks were extremely ruthless. At the same time, the battle between the sovereigns and the demon emperors also erupted in the sky. Although it hadn't been long, the sovereigns and the demon emperors could be said to be old rivals. Both sides only had 8 people left. Without wasting any time, they engaged in a fierce battle as soon as they met. When the battle broke out, Xiao Qin and the others escorted Hao Tian and the others up the city wall. According to the plan, the sovereigns and the demon emperors were already engaged in a fierce battle. Looking at Hao Tian and the others, Xiao Qin shouted coldly, "Kneel." Along with Xiao Chen's shout, Huang Fu Ao and the others swept their feet across Hao Tian and the others' legs. The 4 of them immediately knelt on the ground. After kneeling on the ground, Xiao Qin looked towards the sky where the Dao sovereigns were on the battlefield and shouted loudly, "Don't you want to see who they are?" His voice, which was wrapped in spiritual energy, resounded through the sky and clearly entered the ears of the demon emperors. Upon hearing Xiao Chen's words, the 8 demon emperors who were lucky enough to survive looked towards Xiao Chen in unison. They immediately saw Hao Tian and the others kneeling on the ground. Their faces froze, and one of the demon emperors shouted coldly, "Hao Tian Emosia? Damn juniors, let them go. Otherwise, the demon saint will be enraged and the entire heavenly Chen continent will be bathed in blood. Nobody will be spared." They already knew that the heavenly Chen continent's prodigies had breached the Skylock formation, but they didn't know that Hao Tian and the others had been captured alive. Now that they saw Hao Tian and the others with their own eyes, they were shocked. They were a little distracted. According to Xiao Chen's plan, the demon emperor's attacks didn't stop. For a time, the 8 demon emperors on the city wall were worried about Hao Tian and the others on the city wall while dealing with the sovereign's attacks. No matter what the reason was, as long as the demon emperors took Hao Tian and the other 3 seriously, there was still hope. Shao Chun immediately shouted. If you want Hao Tian and the others to live, stop immediately. Otherwise, I'll kill him right now. Shao Chun shouted furiously. The demon emperors were stunned when they heard Shao Chun's words. However, they quickly rejected him. Young man, you must be dreaming. Let me give you a word of advice. It is best that you let them go. Otherwise, the entire heavenly Chen continent will be buried with them. They did not choose to stop because of Hao Tian's group of 4. Seeing the reactions of the demon emperors, Shao Chen did not mind. He had long since guessed that they would not retreat because of Hao Tian's group of 4. However, that was not what Shao Chen's objective was. Very well, since that's the case, don't blame me. Today, I will slice off the flesh of the 4 of them before your very eyes, Shao Chen said coldly. Then, without waiting for the reactions of the demon emperors, Shao Chen directly took out a dagger and pointed it at the sky. Then, without any hesitation, he cut off a large piece of flesh from Hao Tian's body. A piece of flesh the size of a palm was cut off by Shao Chen. Hao Tian screamed in agony. Hearing Hao Tian's screams, the faces of the devil emperors turned gloomy. Hao Tian and the other 3 were the direct disciples of the devil saint, and they were also the strongest among them. They were deeply favored by the devil saint. Now that they were captured by Shao Chen, if anything happened to them, the devil saint would definitely fly into a rage. At that time, even the devil emperors would not be able to escape punishment. Furthermore, when they thought of the devil saint's means, the hearts of the 8 devil emperors sank, and a chill ran down their spines. Shao Chen actually used Hao Tian and the other 3 to threaten them during the fierce battle. However, it was obvious that the 8 demon emperors were unable to surrender or retreat because of this. They had already lost so many of their forces. If they were unable to take down the Tianqian continent, the consequences would be unimaginable. They couldn't retreat and they couldn't surrender. However, they couldn't just watch Hao Tian and the others get killed by Shao Chen. They wanted to save Hao Tian and the others, but the ruler of the continent of the 9 clouds and the others were blocking their way. They wanted to help, but they couldn't. They heard the horrible shrieks coming from the top of the city wall. After a short time, Shao Chen had cut off 8 or 9 pieces of flesh from Hao Tian's back. His entire back was covered in blood. The pain was so intense that Hao Tian almost fainted. However, each time Hao Tian fainted, Shao Chen would give him a healing pill so that he wouldn't pass out so quickly. The 8 demon emperors were astonished. Hao Tian and the others were demon saints' direct disciples, so they had a higher social status than the demon emperors. They watched Shao Chen cut off Hao Tian's flesh. Finally, the demon emperor who was fighting against the ruler of the pill clouds couldn't take it anymore. He glared at Shao Chen and shouted furiously, "You want to die? Release Hao Tian and the others now, and I can spare your life." Finally, Shao Chen was distracted by Hao Tian's screams. Facing the devil emperor's scolding, Shao Chen was not frightened at all. On the contrary, there was a hint of joy in his eyes. Finally, I succeeded. In the fierce battle with Tao Master Danyun, the devil emperor is finally distracted. While the demon emperor was distracted, the ruler of the pill clouds seized the opportunity. Without hesitation, he stabbed the demon emperor's heart with his sword. The entire plan was to distract the demon emperors so that his attack would land. The ruler of the pill cloud's sword had successfully injured the demon emperor. Not only that, but the scorching spear Hegemon's spear pierced through the abdomen of the other devil emperor, who had been fighting fiercely with the scorching sky Hegemon. Shao Chen clenched his fists at the sight of 2 demon emperors being injured at the same time. Success. He finally succeeded. The plan was progressing more smoothly than he expected. Thanks to the opportunity created by Hao Tian and the others, the ruler of the pill clouds and the scorching sky ruler had both injured their opponents. It was likely that he would be able to kill 2 demon emperors today. "Kill them, kill them!" Shao Chen kept yelling inwardly as he stared at the 2 severely injured devil emperors. As long as he could slay these 2 devil emperors today, the outcome would be set in stone. Please add me to your collection. Please recommend me. Chapter 325. Shouted the demon emperors inwardly. They had already been seriously injured by the Pill Cloud ruler and Scorching Spear ruler. Next, it was up to the Pill Cloud ruler and Scorching Spear ruler to seize the opportunity to kill the 2 demon emperors. The 2 demon emperors were seriously injured, and their fighting strength had plummeted. For a time, the 2 demon emperors were forced to retreat. They were already in a terrible state, but now the situation was even worse. On the other hand, the Pill Cloud ruler and Scorching Sky ruler were naturally unforgiving. They attacked repeatedly, trying to take the 2 demon emperors' lives. Because of that momentary distraction, the situation had completely reversed. The Pill Cloud ruler and Scorching Sky ruler had seized the initiative. When he saw that, the demon emperor who was fighting against the ruler of the continent of the 9 clouds wanted to help, but he was powerless. After all, the vermilion ruler of the continent of the 9 clouds was watching covetously from the side. Retreat. Without much hesitation, the demon emperor who was fighting against the ruler of the continent of the 9 clouds gave the order to retreat. It was obvious that the 2 demon emperors who were being chased by the Pill Cloud ruler and Scorching Sky ruler wouldn't be able to last for long. If they didn't retreat quickly, they would probably die. If the 2 demon emperors died, and the Pill Cloud ruler and Scorching Sky ruler didn't die, the situation would be completely different. The gap between the 2 Tao emperors couldn't be bridged. The demon emperors wanted to retreat, but how could the demon emperors let them do as they wished? They stubbornly fought against them, giving the Pill Cloud ruler and Scorching Sky ruler enough time to kill the 2 demon emperors. With the demon emperors' efforts, even though they wanted to retreat, they couldn't. On the other side, the 2 demon emperors who were seriously injured were like lamps that had run out of oil. It could be said that they were struggling on the verge of death. However, in order to kill the 2 demon emperors, the Pill Cloud ruler and Scorching Sky ruler used all their trump cards. In the end, after a fierce battle, the 2 demon emperors were killed by the Pill Cloud ruler and Scorching Sky ruler. They had succeeded. They had really succeeded. Under Shao Chen's plan, the demon emperors had successfully killed the 2 demon emperors. As a result, the difference in the number of Tao emperors between the 2 sides had widened. The result was even more perfect than he had anticipated. Originally, Shao Chen had assumed that he would be thankful if he could kill off just 1 demon overlord. Now, however, he managed to kill off 2 demon overlords. This was an unexpected gain. Moreover, the demon emperor who was killed by Tao Master Danyun was one of the 2 strongest demon emperors. He was at the perfection of the Tao Emperor realm and had touched the power of law. Now that he was killed, it was great news for the heavenly Chun continent. The expressions of the remaining 6 demon emperors changed drastically when they saw that the 2 demon emperors had been killed while the Pill Cloud ruler and Burning Sky sovereign were still alive. Without any hesitation, they retreated desperately. The outcome of this battle was beyond everyone's expectations. Who would have thought that the rulers of the heavenly Chen continent would be able to kill 2 demon emperors without paying any price? As a result, the situation of the battle had completely changed. When the demon emperors retreated, the army of demonic cultivators below also fled in panic. The rulers didn't chase after the demonic cultivators as they had already achieved their goal. Now that the heavenly Chun continent had the advantage of killing 2 Tao emperors, they obviously had the upper hand in the following battle. Cheers resounded throughout the sky. Since the beginning of the battle, there was no doubt that today's battle was the greatest victory for the heavenly Chun continent. Moreover, it was a victory that could seal the outcome of the battle. The victory made everyone extremely excited. At this time, the rulers also landed on the city wall and looked at Shao Chen and the others. The rulers nodded with gratification. Shao Chen and the others had contributed greatly to their victory. Without Shao Chen and the others, The Pill Cloud ruler and Burning Sky sovereign wouldn't have been able to kill the two demon emperors. As if they could see the dawn of victory, the rulers returned to the city. In order to celebrate this great victory, they beheaded Hao Tian and the others in front of all the cultivators of the heavenly Chen continent. The death of Hao Tian and the others caused waves of cheers to erupt from Western Pass City. Phew, it's finally over. After returning to the central hall, Huang Fu Ao smiled as if a heavy burden had been lifted from his shoulders. The victory of the heavenly Chen continent had already been decided. It was no wonder that Huang Fu Ao was so happy. However, Huang Fu Ao's father, Burning Sky Sovereign, still shouted angrily when he saw this. "Stinking brat, don't be happy too early. As long as the demonic cultivators are not driven out of the heavenly Chen continent, the war will not end." Huang Fu Ao didn't dare to talk back after being reprimanded by his father. He nodded respectfully in response. Seeing Burning Sky Sovereign reprimanding his son, the Wood Sovereign smiled and said, "Burning Sky, it's all thanks to these little fellows. They've already made people look at them in a new light. Don't nitpick too much." The Wood Sovereign actually stood up for Huang Fu Ao. This was definitely the first time in history that this had happened. This also reflected the other rulers' gratification towards Shao Qin and the others. As expected of the heavenly Qin continent's king of pride. Even though we've obtained a complete victory in this battle, we still can't let our guard down. We should drive the devil cultivators out of the continent in one go. Now that we have more Dao emperors than the devil cultivators, I think we should launch a counterattack as soon as possible. We can't give the devil cultivators too much of a chance, said the heavenly ruler after the heavenly wood ruler finished speaking. Now that they had the upper hand, they couldn't give the demonic cultivators any chance to turn the tables. They had to use the momentum of their victory to launch a counterattack as soon as possible. If they could kill a few more demon emperors, that would be even better. They could seal their victory in advance. Hearing the heavenly sovereign's words, the other rulers nodded in agreement. However, in the end, the heavenly sovereign said worriedly, "Now that we seem to have the upper hand, there's still one problem that hasn't been solved. The demon saint has yet to appear." The most important thing was that the demon saint had yet to appear. However, the demon saint had already stepped into the saint stage. He wasn't someone the rulers could deal with. Therefore, the Pill Cloud Sovereign said indifferently when he heard the heavenly sovereign's words. "The saint stage isn't something we can deal with. We should end this battle as soon as possible. As for the demon saint, we can only place our hopes on the heavenly sovereign." The heavenly Chen continent didn't have a saint stage expert. If the demon saint made a move, they could only rely on the heavenly sovereign. After all, before the battle, the rulers had discussed with the heavenly sovereign that the heavenly sovereign would deal with the demon saint. Because of this, the heavenly sovereign hadn't made a move until now. His goal was to preserve his strength to deal with the demon saint. They didn't need to worry about the demon saint. They just needed to think about how to defeat the army of demonic cultivators and the demon emperors. That was their mission. After the Pill Cloud Sovereign said that, the ruler of the continent of the Nine Clouds said, "The Pill Cloud Sovereign is right. Let's heal as soon as possible. Tomorrow, we'll take the initiative to attack the West Sea domain. It's best if we can kill the other 6 demon emperors at once. Please add me to your collection. Please recommend me." Chapter 326. The ruler of the continent of the Nine Clouds decided to launch a counterattack the next day. Not only the central region, but also the Dongyang region and the Beiyu region would launch an attack. The other rulers didn't object to the ruler's decision. The ruler of the continent of the Nine Clouds looked at Shao Qin and the others and said, "You've made a great contribution this time. You don't need to participate in tomorrow's battle. Rest in peace." Shao Qin and the others didn't need to participate in tomorrow's battle. When they heard the ruler of the continent of the Nine Clouds, Shao Qin and the others understood what he meant. They didn't mind and just nodded. In any case, the Tiantian continent already had the advantage. Besides, with Shao Chun and the others' cultivation levels, even if they participated in the battle, it wouldn't change anything. The ruler of the continent of the Nine Clouds told Shao Chun and the others to leave and rest. Then, the rulers started to heal their injuries and get ready for the next day's battle. Just as the sovereigns decided to launch a large-scale counterattack, the 6 demon emperors had successfully escaped back to western Zhou City in the West Sea domain. After suffering such a huge loss in this battle, the 6 demon emperors' faces were gloomy and they couldn't care less about their injuries. Now that the heavenly Chun continent had 2 more Dao emperors, it was obvious that they couldn't continue the battle. Let's go back and report to the demon saint. We can't fight against the Tiantian continent alone, said one of the demon emperors. There was already a gap of 2 Dao Emperor realm experts between them. In this way, they clearly didn't have any ability to resist. If the battle continued, then the heavenly stellar continent's advantage would only expand without limit. In this way, they had no other choice but to return to the Blood Demon continent and report this to the Devil Saint. Hearing the Demon Emperor's words, the other 5 Demon Emperors fell silent. After a while, the strongest Demon Emperor said in a weak voice, "Send someone back to the Blood Demon continent to report to Lord Demon Saint. Tell him to come to the Heavenly Chun continent as soon as possible. We can't hold on for much longer." They had no choice but to ask the Demon Saint for help. That day, the 6 Demon Emperors sent a Dao Venerable Cultivator back to the Blood Demon continent. The Dao Venerable Cultivator quickly returned to the Blood Demon continent through an empty space tunnel. He left through the tunnel and headed north. After a few hours, he stopped by a blood lake. The lake was not very big, but what was surprising was that the water in the lake was actually blood-red, and there was a strong smell of blood constantly emitting from it. This blood lake was the residence of the Demon Saint. There was an ancient blood-red palace beside the lake. The Dao Master quickly walked to the palace and knelt down respectfully. He shouted at the palace gate, "I'm here to see the Demon Saint under the order of the Demon Saint." After he finished speaking, he didn't recover for a long time. However, this Dao Master didn't dare to make the slightest movement. He prostrated himself respectfully on the ground with an extremely humble expression. After the time it takes to brew a cup of tea, an indifferent voice sounded from the hall. "What's the matter?" His voice was emotionless. Hearing his words, the Dao Master Demonic Cultivator replied respectfully, "Lord Demon Saint, the war situation in the Heavenly Chun continent has changed. The Demon Emperors are unable to withstand the counterattack of the Heavenly Chun continent. We invite Lord Demon Saint to the Heavenly Chun continent." He told the Demon Saint the truth about the war in the Heavenly Chun continent. This time there was no response. After a while, the space in front of the Dao Venerable Cultivator was torn open. Then, a middle-aged man in a blood-red robe walked out of the space crack. The man looked ordinary, but his eyes sent chills down one's spine. It was as if one's divine soul would be destroyed by his gaze. The Dao Venerable Cultivator didn't dare to raise his head to look at the middle-aged man. He prostrated himself respectfully on the ground. His head was almost touching the ground, and his body couldn't help but tremble slightly. He couldn't bear the pressure of facing the Demon Saint at all. Tearing the void was the ability of a saint. He could travel tens of thousands of miles with a single step. Just this ability alone was far from what a Dao Emperor could compare with. The middle-aged man in front of him was the Demon Saint mentioned by the Demon Emperors. His name was Blackwing, and people called him Demon Saint Blackwing. Facing the Dao Master Demonic Cultivator prostrating on the ground, Demon Sage Blackwing said in an extremely flat tone, his eyes as calm as an ancient well, "You can't even take down the Heavenly Chun continent? I deserve to die." Hearing Demon Saint Blackwing's words, the Dao Venerable Cultivator hurriedly admitted his mistake. His forehead was covered with beads of sweat. He kept kowtowing, but the black-winged demon saint ignored him. He slowly walked past the Tao Master and looked into the distance. He seemed to be recalling something as he muttered to himself. Shao Xing, I didn't expect that I would step into the heavenly Chun continent one day. You didn't expect this, did you? Saying that, Demon Saint Blackwing took a step forward. At the same time, the space in front of him was torn apart like a piece of paper. A spatial crack appeared, and Demon Saint Blackwing's figure disappeared into it. After Demon Saint Blackwing left, the Tao Venerable Cultivator secretly heaved a sigh of relief. He really felt suffocated when facing Demon Saint Blackwing. However, just as he relaxed, Demon Saint Blackwing's voice sounded out of nowhere. I'm very disappointed that you can't even take down a continent without a saint. Saying that, a red light descended from the sky and instantly disappeared into the Tao Venerable Cultivator's body. His expression changed drastically, and he shouted in horror. Demon Saint Blackwing, I know my mistake. Please give me another chance, Demon Saint Blackwing. He shouted in horror, but in the midst of his scream, the Tao Venerable Cultivator quickly turned into a pool of blood. His blood eventually flowed into the blood-red lake. The Tao Venerable Cultivators had asked for help from Demon Saint Blackwing, but the rulers did not know about this. Even if they knew, they would not change their plan. After all, they had to face Demon Saint Blackwing eventually, and Heavenly Elder was the trump card of the Heavenly Qin continent against Demon Saint Blackwing. After a silent night, early the next morning, the rulers led their armies out of Western Pass City and went straight to the hinterland of the West Sea Domain. At the same time, the armies of the Heavenly Qin continent from the Eastern Sun region and the Northern Mountain region were also advancing toward the hinterland of the West Sea Domain. The full-scale counterattack finally began. Facing the full-scale attack of the Heavenly Qin continent, the Tao Venerable Cultivators chose to withdraw with all their strength. They guarded Western Zhou City and the spatial passage, waiting for the attack. Please collect, vote, recommend. Chapter 327. Standing on the city walls of Western Pass City, Shao Chun and the others watched the army leave. Long Qing asked worriedly, Little brother, do you think Elder Sky has a way to deal with the Demon Saint's arrival? Shao Chun had already learned of Elder Sky's existence from the sovereigns. Hearing Long Qing's question, he replied, I don't know, but we can only place our hopes on Elder Sky. A saint is an existence that even the sovereigns can't reach, let alone us. We've already done what we should do in this battle. As for the outcome, we can only leave it to fate. He knew very well that they had no ability to resist the Demon Saint. At the same time, Shao Chen also knew that they had already done everything they could in this earth-shattering battle. Using Hao Yin and the other three to help the sovereigns kill 2 demon emperors was the limit of what Shao Chen could do. As for what happened next, they could only rely on the sovereigns and Elder Sky. Long Qing didn't say anything after hearing Shao Chen's words. Indeed, what happened next was beyond their control. The Heavenly Qin continent advanced into the hinterland of the West Sea Domain. At the same time, in Western Zhou City, the remaining 6 demon emperors had already gathered the army of demonic cultivators. They gave up on other places and only defended Western Zhou City and the spatial tunnel. Their purpose was obviously to wait for Demon Saint Blackwing's arrival. Damn it. It's just the Heavenly Qin continent, but we still have to trouble Lord Demon Saint. Sitting in a circle, one of the demon emperors scolded coldly. All right, let's think about how to deal with Lord Demon Saint's punishment. Lord Demon Saint must be extremely disappointed that we didn't manage to conquer the Heavenly Qin continent. Hearing this, another demon emperor said snappily. At this point, the 6 demon emperors knew that they would definitely be punished by Lord Demon Saint after this. Damn it, it's all because of those juniors. If it weren't for their tricks, we wouldn't have fallen to such a state. He blamed everything on Shao Chen and the others. Indeed, if Shao Chen hadn't used Hao Tian to distract everyone, how could the 2 devil emperors have been killed by the Pill Cloud ruler and the Burning Sky ruler? Who would have thought that the situation of the battle would change because of a junior? Hearing this demon emperor mention Shao Chen, the other demon emperors present were all brimming with killing intent. If they had the chance, they would definitely kill Shao Chen without hesitation. It was all because of him. A junior with the cultivation of Sky Realm had actually changed the entire situation of the battle. Damn it. However, it was too late to say anything now. They could only wait for the arrival of the Demon Saint. Just as the Heavenly Stellar Continent's army was launching a full-scale counterattack and the Xioma cultivators were waiting for Lord Demon Saint's arrival, Sky Elder's illusory figure stood proudly in the sky at the peak of the Heavenly Stellar Mountain. His gaze was fixed in the direction of the West Sea domain. He didn't feel the slightest bit of joy because of yesterday's great victory. On the contrary, Sky Elder's expression was extremely solemn. Yesterday's great victory meant that the Demon Saint was about to arrive. Already aware of Demon Saint Blackwing's arrival, Sky Elder frowned and sighed lightly. Then, he walked into the shrines of the Heavenly Stellar Mountain. The shrines were the place where the sovereigns discussed matters. At the same time, it was also the center of the Heavenly Stellar Continent. However, no one knew that right below the shrines, in the belly of the Heavenly Stellar Mountain, there was a bluestone palace. His figure directly passed through the shrines and arrived at the bluestone palace that no one knew about. This was the core of the Heavenly Stellar Mountain's great array and also the source of Sky Elder's power. At the same time, there was a secret hidden in the bluestone palace that no one knew about. This secret could be said to be the last trump card to protect the Heavenly Stellar Continent. Regarding this bluestone palace, even the sovereigns didn't know about it. Along the way to the bluestone palace, the entire palace was extremely simple and unadorned. Moreover, it was extremely spacious. Aside from a floating corpse in the middle of the palace, there was nothing else. Arriving in front of the floating corpse, the corpse was that of a young man. He was extremely handsome, with sharp eyebrows and bright eyes. His hair was as black as ink. However, if one looked closely, they would discover that this corpse's appearance was actually very similar to Shao Chen's. In other words, it could be said that Shao Chen and this corpse looked very similar. Staring blankly at the young man in front of him, Sky Elder didn't have any signs of life. After a long while, Sky Elder softly sighed and said, "In the end, I still couldn't escape and had to wake you up?" No one answered Sky Elder's question. As soon as he finished speaking, Sky Elder gently pointed at the corpse's forehead. In an instant, a dazzling golden light burst out from the corpse's forehead. Following the appearance of the golden light, the corpse's eyes actually slowly opened. After an entire quarter of an hour, the corpse seemed to have come alive. His eyes were filled with spirit, and his body was no longer floating in the air. Instead, it landed firmly on the ground. Sky Elder had awakened the young man. However, this wasn't a resurrection. Instead, he had only awakened a strand of the young man's remnant soul. Using the remnant soul to be reborn, this was only temporary. It wouldn't be long before the young man's remnant soul disappeared completely from the world. Being able to use a remnant soul to be reborn was definitely a heaven-shaking method. Even the sovereigns couldn't do it. Only saints had such power and divine abilities. This young man was a saint from the Heavenly Stellar Continent 3,000 years ago. At the same time, he was also a saint who had resisted the army of demonic cultivators 3,000 years ago. However, in that battle, the young man had died with hatred in his heart. However, before he died, the young man had left behind a trump card. He had forcefully separated a strand of his soul and sealed it in his corpse. Then, Sky Elder took it to the Bluestone Palace in Heavenly Stellar Mountain for safekeeping. This was so that when the demonic cultivators descended one day, he would be able to resist the Demon Saint. Moreover, the young man had a name that Shao Chen was extremely familiar with, Shao Xing. That's right, it was the same Shao Xing that Shao Chen had seen on the tombstone in the Shao clan's ancestral grounds. Sky Elder looked at Xiao Xing with a complicated gaze. After a long while, he slowly said, "They're here. I know. Otherwise, you wouldn't have released the seal on my remnant soul." Xiao Xing wasn't surprised by Sky Elder's words. He smiled faintly. He had long guessed that the demonic cultivators wouldn't give up. From the battle 3,000 years ago, Xiao Xing knew that the demonic cultivators would descend one day. He had sealed his remnant soul for 3,000 years, just for this moment. Xiao Xing wasn't surprised that the demonic cultivators would descend once again. After speaking, he paused for a moment and asked with a complicated expression, "How is the Xiao clan now?" "It's declined. It's now located in a small city in the Eastern Sun region. It's no longer as strong as it was in the past." Sky Elder answered truthfully in response to Xiao Xing's question. Hearing this, Xiao Xing's eyes flashed with disappointment. However, he still said calmly, "Is that so? That's fine. There's no clan in the world that can last forever. It's already very fortunate that their bloodline still exists in this world." Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 328. Xiao Chun had mixed feelings about the decline of the Xiao clan. Yes, 3 years had passed. The Xiao clan, which was once at the height of its power, was now in complete decline. The golden age of the Xiao clan, which was once the center of attention, was gone forever. Xiao Xing was the ancestor of the Xiao clan. 3,000 years ago, the Xiao clan was the only overlord of the entire heavenly Chen continent. They were known as the Sacred Clan. There were many saints in the clan, and there were many Dao emperors. As for the Dao sovereigns, Dao kings, and cultivators below them, they were innumerable. It could be said that in Xiao Xing's era, the heavenly Chen continent was the Xiao clan's world. The Sacred Clan was the overlord of the heavenly Chen continent. In that era, no one dared to go against the Xiao clan. The Sacred Clan could also be called a Saint Clan. The first condition for a clan to be called a Sacred Clan was that there was a saint in the clan. At the same time, other sects and empires with saints could also be called saint sects or saint empires. In short, as long as it had the word saint, it meant that it was an extraordinary and powerful force that stood proudly in a region. Other forces without saints could only bow their heads in front of the saint gentry families. The Xiao clan used to be such a powerful sacred clan, and it flourished for a period of time. Unfortunately, the Xiao clan's saint, Xiao Xing, perished in the Great War 3,000 years ago. At the same time, all the Dao masters and Dao kings in the clan were annihilated, and only a few old, young, and women survived. As a result, the decline of the Xiao clan was inevitable. It was no exaggeration to say that in the battle 3,000 years ago, the Xiao clan fought against the army of demonic cultivators alone. It was also because of the Xiao clan's existence that the heavenly Chen continent was preserved. Otherwise, the heavenly Chen continent would have been destroyed 3,000 years ago. Thinking about the past 3,000 years, Xiao Xing slowly came back to his senses. He then looked at Elder Sky and smiled. "Since the demon saint is here, let's act according to plan." Xiao Xing was already prepared to face the demon saint again. Otherwise, he wouldn't have forced his saint soul to remain. Hearing Xiao Xing's words, Elder Sky asked in a deep voice, "You really don't need my help?" "No, Elder Sky has more important things to do," Xiao Xing said. Xiao Xing didn't want Sky Elder to take action against the demon saint that was about to descend. It wasn't that he looked down on Sky Elder, but that Sky Elder had more important things to do. This matter was related to the fate of all living things in the heavenly Chen continent. But Elder Sky's formation. He didn't want Elder Sky's help. Seeing this, Elder Sky didn't say anything. Indeed, what he needed to do was more important than Xiao Xing. Xiao Xing and Elder Sky looked at each other and smiled. One of them was a dead man who had been dead for more than 3,000 years, while the other was an ancient formation spirit who had lived for countless years. Their eyes met. Xiao Xing said with a carefree smile, After this farewell, I'm afraid we won't have the chance to meet again. Life and death are predestined. Go. Use this remnant of your soul to fight for the heavenly Churn continent again. Elder Sky smiled when he heard Shaoxing's words. They already knew their fate. But whether it was Shaoxing or Elder Sky, they didn't have the slightest fear or resistance. They just felt carefree. While the two were talking, a monstrous blood aura spread out from the spatial tunnel in the West Sea domain. In an instant it enveloped the sky and earth. The dense blood chi caused the sky of the West Sea domain to turn blood-red. At the same time, with the appearance of the blood chi, a terrifying pressure was emitted from the space tunnel. The ruler of the continent of the Nine Clouds and the others were originally rushing towards western Zhou City, but when they sensed the monstrous blood aura, they looked at the dark spatial tunnel with gloomy expressions. In the face of this pressure, even the rulers felt their hearts palpitate. Looking at the horizon, the ruler of the 10,000 weapons frowned and muttered, "Is he finally here?" Needless to say, everyone could guess what this pressure and blood aura meant. The demon saint of the demonic cultivators was about to descend. Only a saint could have such power. Even the almighty Tao emperors felt their hearts palpitate. Everyone on the heavenly Chun continent looked at the West Sea domain. Even ordinary people could feel that an extremely powerful existence was about to descend on the heavenly Chun continent. It was as if the end of the world had come. The person had not yet arrived, but the huge pressure had already made everyone tremble in fear. Under everyone's gaze, a middle-aged man in a blood-red robe slowly walked out from the spatial tunnel. His hands were behind his back and his face was calm. He looked down at the earth like a king who stood above the heavens and earth. Needless to say, this middle-aged man was naturally the Black-Winged Devil Saint. With the arrival of the Black-Winged Devil Saint, the 6 surviving Devil Emperors immediately rose into the air from western Zhou City. They knelt in front of the Black-Winged Devil Saint and bowed their heads respectfully. "Greetings, Lord Demon Saint. We have failed in our task. Please punish us." He glanced at the 6 demon emperors in front of him and said in an extremely indifferent tone, "After this is over, you will be confined in the Blood Lake for a year." He did not hide his punishment at all. When the 6 demon emperors heard Demon Saint Blackwing's words, their eyes flashed with fear. They knew very well what confinement in the Blood Lake for a year meant. Even 2 hours in the Blood Lake was enough to make them wish they were dead, let alone a year. They didn't expect Demon Sage Blackwing's punishment to be so severe. However, the 6 demon emperors didn't dare to show the slightest dissatisfaction. Otherwise, they wouldn't just be confined for a year. They might not even be able to survive. Demon Saint Blackwing nodded respectfully and ignored the 6 demon emperors. He looked at the heavenly Chun continent indifferently. After a long time, a faint smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. "It's been 3,000 years. I didn't expect to set foot on the heavenly Chun continent again. This time, I will not return empty-handed." "Is that so? Then I'm afraid I'll have to disappoint you, Demon Saint Blackwing." He thought back to what had happened 3,000 years ago. However, as soon as Black-Winged Demon Saint finished speaking, a calm voice sounded out of nowhere. Then, Shaoxing appeared in front of Black-Winged Demon Saint without any warning. Seeing Shaoxing, Demon Saint Blackwing's calm face finally changed. A look of surprise flashed in his eyes. Demon Saint Blackwing was surprised to see Shaoxing again. "Shaoxing, you're not dead?" Chapter 329. Facing Shaoxing, the Black-Winged Sacred Lord was horrified. How could someone who should have died 3,000 years ago still be alive? Not only that, but he also appeared before him. He was in disbelief. But soon, after a brief moment of astonishment, the Black-Winged Sacred Lord realized that Shaoxing was different. He narrowed his eyes slightly, and after a moment, he sneered. "A remnant of a sacred soul? I see." As a saint, the Black-Winged Sacred Lord's eyesight was naturally shrewd. He quickly saw that Shaoxing was just a remnant of a sacred soul. In an instant, the black-winged sacred lord felt relieved. If Shao Xing were still alive, perhaps the black-winged sacred lord would be a little afraid of him. After all, in the battle 3,000 years ago, the black-winged sacred lord had fully experienced Shao Xing's terrifying strength. When Shao Xing was at his peak, the black-winged sacred lord admitted that he was no match for him. But now, Shao Xing was only a remnant of a soul. How strong could a remnant of a soul be? After recovering from the initial shock, Shao Xing said calmly in the face of the black-winged sacred lord's sneer, "I didn't expect to see you again one day." There was no hatred in his words. In the face of a former enemy, Shao Xing appeared very indifferent. At the same time, upon hearing Shao Xing's words, the black-winged sacred lord smiled and said, "I didn't expect to see you again either. But Shao Xing, now that you are only a remnant of a soul, do you think you can stop me?" Facing Shao Xing, who was only a remnant of a soul, the black-winged sacred lord didn't pay too much attention to him. In this regard, Shao Xing didn't mind. He smiled and said indifferently. His voice clearly reached the ears of the rulers in the distance. "Everyone, this is the final battle. Annihilate the demonic cultivator army with all your might." They didn't know Shao Xing's identity, but when they heard his words, they instinctively chose to obey. Shao Xing's indifferent words were filled with an unquestionable authority. It was as if Shao Xing's words were the will of heaven and earth. No one could refute them. They could only obey. This was the mighty power of a saint. Their words were law, and they had already completely grasped the power of the laws. Every word and action of theirs was like acting on behalf of the heavens, and it was impossible for others to resist. They bowed respectfully to Shao Xing, then all of the sovereigns roared furiously, "Kill the demonic cultivator!" Following the cries of the rulers, the heavenly Qin continent's 3 armies simultaneously charged toward western Zhou City. Naturally, the remaining 6 demon emperors wouldn't allow themselves to be captured without putting up a fight. They immediately led their armies in a fierce counterattack. The people below quickly engaged in a fierce battle. Only Shao Xing and the black-winged sacred lord were left standing proudly in the sky. It was obvious that the devil cultivators were in a disadvantaged position during the intense battle. After all, there was a difference of 2 Dao emperors between the two sides. In this way, the sovereigns were entirely capable of joining forces to encircle and annihilate the other devil emperors. The black-winged sacred lord glanced indifferently at the battle below and said, "Shao Xing, you want to stop me with just a remnant of a soul? Surrender, and I can spare the life of your descendant." He wanted Shao Xing to surrender. Hearing this, Shao Xing replied without hesitation, "Is that so? Unfortunately, my Shao clan doesn't have people who would drag out an ignoble existence. Let's stop talking nonsense and fight. In any case, it's impossible for you to stop. Then bring it on. Don't blame me if you court death." Hearing Shao Xing's answer, the black-winged sacred lord didn't say anything more. As soon as he finished speaking, a surge of blood qi erupted from his body. At the same time, a surge of golden saint qi rose from Shao Xing's body. When a warrior broke through to the saint realm, the spiritual power in his body would transform into saint qi. Compared to spiritual power, saint qi was more solid and powerful. It could be said that saint qi was the source of the strength of a saint. At the same time, he raised his aura to the extreme. The saint qi of the black-winged sacred lord was as red as blood. The battle between the saints hadn't yet begun, but the terrifying pressure had already frightened everyone. "Shao Xing, if you hadn't died, maybe I would have gone easy on you. But now you're just a remnant soul. Even if I don't do anything, you won't last long. Since you court death, don't blame me for being ruthless. After I kill you, I will slaughter the entire Shao clan," the black-winged sacred lord shouted coldly as his monstrous saint qi dyed the sky red. Hearing the black-winged sacred lord's words, Shao Xing didn't say much. He just said indifferently, "Let's talk about it if you can defeat me." As soon as he finished speaking, The two saints soared into the sky at the same time and soon disappeared into the horizon. The destructive power of the battle between the saints was terrifying, so it was impossible for Shao Xing and the Black-Winged Sacred Lord to start a battle on the Tianqian continent. If they did, the entire Tianqian continent wouldn't be able to withstand the aftermath of their battle. Therefore, there was an unwritten rule between the saints. Once a holy war broke out, the battlefield would basically be in the endless starry sky. Because there, the saints could fight with all their might and didn't have to worry about the destruction brought about by the holy war. The two saints soared into the sky and soon disappeared from the eyes of the world. Looking at Shao Xing and the Black-Winged Sacred Lord disappearing into the horizon, Shao Chen, who had been standing on the city wall of Western Pass, fell into deep thought with a complicated expression. Although he had never seen Shao Xing before, the moment he appeared, the bloodline power in Shao Chen's body was uncontrollably agitated, and an instinctive sense of intimacy made Shao Chen have an indescribable feeling for Shao Xing. Who was that person just now? A saint from the Tianqian continent? Shao Chen was silent, but Huang Fu Ao and the others beside him were discussing excitedly. There were still saints in the Tianqian continent? Naturally, no one could tell that Shao Xing was just a remnant soul, but one person noticed Shao Xing's secret, and that was Chun Ling. As someone who had reincarnated, Chun Ling's eyesight was much sharper than even the sovereign's. Standing beside Shao Chen, Chun Ling said calmly, "That saint just now is already dead. It's just a remnant soul." Chun Ling's voice was not loud, so only Shao Chen heard what he said. Hearing that Shao Xing was just a remnant soul, Shao Chen frowned. A remnant soul could deal with a living saint? Seeing Shao Chen frown, Chun Ling knew what Shao Chen was thinking. He smiled and said, "There are strong and weak saints. Although it's just a remnant soul, Shao Xing's strength is far from what the Black-Winged Sacred Lord can compare to. Just watch, it won't be long before Shao Xing can kill the Black-Winged Sacred Lord." After saying that, Chun Ling secretly exclaimed, "Who would have thought that the Tianqian continent still had a half-step quasi-saint?" Chapter 330. It could be seen that Shao Xing was an existence that had one foot in the quasi-saint realm. Although he was not a true quasi-saint, his strength was definitely not something that an ordinary saint could compare to. As for the division of saints, because a saint had not appeared in the heavenly Chen continent for 3,000 years, it was naturally unclear. In general, saints were divided into 4 levels, and there was an insurmountable gap between each level. Above the Tao Emperor realm were the half-saint, saint, quasi-saint, and supreme saint. Among them, the half-saint was an existence that had comprehended the power of laws, but had not transformed his spiritual energy into saint energy, so he was called a half-saint. He was not a true saint, but the strength of a half-saint was enough to crush a Tao Emperor realm almighty. Above the half-saint was the saint, which was the level of the Black-Winged Demon Saint. They had already stepped into the true saint realm, and the spiritual energy in their body had completely transformed into saint energy. They had truly achieved transcendence and stood proudly between heaven and earth. As for the quasi-saint and supreme saint, they were even more terrifying, especially the supreme saint, who was known as the ruler of heaven and earth. Even Chun Ling did not know much about the supreme saint. Although he had seen a supreme saint before, it was only from afar. He did not expect that there was a half-step quasi-saint on the heavenly Chen continent. Moreover, looking at the intensity of Shao Xing's saint energy, he was probably not far from breaking through to the quasi-saint realm. If it was not for his death, Shao Xing would probably have become a quasi-saint. With a quasi-saint in charge, how could the heavenly Chen continent have fallen to such a state? Somehow, Chun Ling seemed to have guessed why the blood demon continent had been brooding over the heavenly Chen continent. The reason was the existence of Shao Xing. At the level of saint, if one wanted to take a step further, it was not enough to look at one's own talent. The right time, the right place, and the right people were indispensable. To put it simply, if a saint wanted to break through to the secondary saint stage, it was impossible to do so just by relying on their own talent. They also needed the help of the power of the origin. In other words, the continent they were on had to have the power of the origin. As for origin energy, it was the first type of energy formed when the vast universe was born. It was extremely precious, and not every continent possessed it. It could even be said that in the entire universe, the number of continents that possessed origin energy could be counted with one's fingers. Without the power of the origin source, it was absolutely impossible for one to break through to the secondary saint realm, no matter how talented they were. Perhaps it was because of the scarcity of origin energy, and the fact that Shao Xing had reached the level of a half-step secondary saint, which meant that Heavenly Qin continent had origin energy. However, for some unknown reason, the demon saint of the blood demon continent found out about it and guessed that Heavenly Qin continent might have origin energy, which was why the blood demon continent was so resentful towards Heavenly Qin continent. In the end, the reason why the blood demon continent was so persistent in attacking the Heavenly Qin continent was because of the Heavenly Qin continent's origin energy. This was also the only way for a saint to break through to the quasi-saint realm. He sighed. He didn't expect the small Heavenly Qin continent to be so extraordinary. It even had source energy. He didn't tell anyone about this. After all, it was still too far away for Shao Qin and the others to know about the origin energy and quasi-saint realm. They were only at the heaven realm now. Just as Chun Ling had roughly guessed the whole story, outside western Zhou City, the sovereigns had already begun to suppress the 6 demon emperors with their advantage in numbers. There were 2 more Tao emperors. At this moment, the Pill Cloud ruler and the 9th heaven ruler were working together to kill a demon emperor at the peak of the Tao emperor realm. As for the burning sky ruler, he had joined the battle below and was wantonly slaughtering the cultivators on the side of the demonic cultivators. It was said before that if there was a Tao emperor realm cultivator that no one could stop, he would absolutely be in existence that could destroy the world. At this moment, the burning sky ruler was like a tiger in a flock of sheep. No one on the side of the demonic cultivators could stop him. The burning sky ruler could casually kill a large number of cultivators below the Tao emperor realm. Only Tao sovereigns could resist him, but they could only hold on for a short while. It could be said that the situation was completely in the hands of the Heavenly Qin continent. Not only was the burning sky ruler wantonly slaughtering the demonic cultivators, but the demon emperor who was surrounded by the Pill Cloud ruler and the 9th heaven ruler didn't seem to be able to hold on for much longer. As long as they killed him, the Heavenly Qin continent's advantage would continue to expand. As such, the outcome of the battle was almost certain. Of course, the most important thing was still the outcome of the battle between Shao Xing and the Black Wing Saint. The rulers didn't care about the battle between the saints. They knew very well that it wasn't something they could interfere in. What they should do now was to defeat the demonic cultivators and the remaining demon emperors as soon as possible. An intense battle broke out. After several hours of bloody battle, a miserable cry rang out. The demon emperor who was besieged by the Pill Cloud ruler and the sovereign of the 9th heaven finally perished. It could be said that the demon emperor had done his best, but in the end, he still couldn't change anything. His fate was sealed from the beginning when the 2 sovereigns joined forces. How could he have any chance of victory when fighting 1 against 2? After killing another demon emperor, the Heavenly Qin continent's advantage expanded again. Not only did they have 3 more Tao emperors, but the number of other cultivators was also quickly pulled apart with the help of the burning sky ruler. For a time, the Heavenly Qin continent had an overwhelming advantage. The battle began to develop in the direction everyone expected. It could be said that the demonic cultivators had fallen into a desperate situation because of Shao Chen's little plan. As the saying goes, a single wrong move could lead to a complete loss. Because Shao Chen had used Hao Tian's group of 4 to kill 2 demon emperors, the situation of the battle had been completely reversed. The battle continued. The demonic cultivators were forced to retreat. If it wasn't for the arrival of the Black Wing Demon Saint, the remaining demonic cultivators would have fled. At this moment, the only hope left in the hearts of these demonic cultivators was the Black Wing Demon Saint. Just as many demonic cultivators were hoping that the Demon Saint could turn the tide, Shao Xing and the Black Wing Demon Saint appeared in the sky without any warning. The appearance of the 2 saints caused everyone to unconsciously stop what they were doing. The outcome of the battle between the saints had been decided. Therefore, it was naturally the focus of everyone's attention. Although the heavenly Qin continent had an absolute advantage, the battle between the saints was still the deciding factor of the battle. Standing in the sky and facing the 2 saints, everyone, including the sovereigns and demon emperors, held their breaths in concentration. No one knew what the outcome would be. Everyone was secretly nervous. Chapter 331. The originally intense battlefield instantly fell silent with the appearance of Black Wing Saint and Shao Xing. Everyone was waiting for the result of the Battle of the Saint. Under everyone's gaze, the expressions of Black Wing Saint and Shao Xing gradually changed. Shao Xing was still smiling indifferently, while Black Wing Saint's face was gloomy and there was a look of disbelief in his eyes. He stared at Shao Xing and said coldly, "You? How is this possible? You're just a wisp of remnant soul." The Black Winged Devil Saint's words had already explained everything. Shao Xing had won the battle between the saints, and the Black Winged Devil Saint had lost. He had been defeated by a wisp of Shao Chen's soul. Half-step quasi-saint, this was indeed not something an ordinary saint could compare with. Of course, Shao Xing had also paid a heavy price to defeat Black Wing Saint. At the same time, he had also made a lot of preparations to succeed. After all, as Black Wing Saint had said, Shao Chen was just a wisp of remnant soul. Black Wing Saint spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, the countless demonic cultivators below turned pale. "It's over. It's really over. Even His Excellency the Great Demon Saint has been defeated. Who else can they count on?" Shao Xing didn't care about the changes in the expressions of the people below. Upon hearing Black Wing Saint's words, he said indifferently, "The power of a quasi-saint isn't something you can speculate about. Although I haven't broken through to the quasi-saint realm and am only a wisp of remnant soul now, it's not impossible for me to kill you with some means." In Shao Xing's opinion, it wasn't impossible to kill Black Wing Saint. The power of a quasi-saint was unpredictable and far from what ordinary saints could speculate about. Upon hearing Shao Xing's words, Black Wing Saint smiled. It was a very complicated smile, one that contained unwillingness and hatred. Looking at the 2 saints in the sky, the sovereigns below finally calmed down. The Devil Saint had finally been dealt with. As such, the mountain that had been weighing on their hearts had finally disappeared. Furthermore, with the current situation, without the Devil Saint, victory was already set in stone. As long as they killed the remaining devil cultivators and destroyed the spatial tunnel, they would be able to declare victory. With victory in sight, all of the heavenly Qin continent's martial artists seemed to have seen hope, the dawn of victory. However, just when everyone thought that the war was over and the heavenly Qin continent was safe, cracks began to appear on Black Wing Saint's body in the sky. These cracks spread all over his body, and he kept spitting out mouthfuls of blood. Seeing that he was not going to survive, Black Wing Demon Saint laughed out loud at the last moment. He was not afraid of death. He looked at the people of the heavenly Qin continent below and laughed coldly. "Haha, do you think that the heavenly Qin continent is safe now that this saint has fallen? Haha, what a joke, what a joke. This saint is indeed about to fall, but your heavenly Qin continent's last trump card, Shao Xing, won't be around for long. From now on, the heavenly Qin continent will truly have no saints. Haha." Even at the brink of death, he still laughed out loud. At this point, Black-Winged Demon Saint uncontrollably coughed out mouthfuls of blood. After a long while, Black-Winged Demon Saint stopped coughing and used the last of his strength to speak. Perhaps you think that so what if the heavenly Qin continent has no saints? Haven't I also fallen? But do you really think that I am the only saint on the Blood Demon continent? Haha, let me tell you, there are a total of 9 saints on the Blood Demon continent. Excluding me, there are still 8 saints. Now that I have fallen on the heavenly Qin continent, the other 8 devil saints will descend on the heavenly Qin continent in a few days. When that time comes, I wonder who in the heavenly Qin continent will be able to stand up against the 8 devil saints at the same time. Haha. At this point, Black-Winged Demon Saint's body suddenly exploded, turning into a cloud of blood mist in the sky. At the same time, there seemed to be a mournful wail coming from the sky, as though the heavens were crying because of Black-Winged Demon Saint's death. The mournful wail resounded through the sky as a rain of blood poured down. A saint had fallen and the world was silent. Because of Black-Winged Demon Saint's death, a strange phenomenon appeared in the heavenly Qin continent. However, in the face of this strange phenomenon that they had never seen before, the people of the heavenly Qin continent didn't pay much attention to it. At this moment, everyone kept recalling the words that Black-Winged Demon Saint said before his death. 9 devil saints. The Blood Demon continent actually had 9 devil saints. Now that one was dead, there were still 8 left. In an instant, the people of the heavenly Qin continent felt as though they had fallen from heaven to hell. They thought that the heavenly Qin continent would be safe after getting rid of Black-Winged Demon Saint. Who would have thought that the strength of the Blood Demon continent wasn't as simple as they thought? It could even be said that the heavenly Qin continent had underestimated the Blood Demon continent. The entire Blood Demon continent didn't belong to Black-Winged Demon Saint alone, but 9 devil saints coexisted. As though a bolt of lightning struck their hearts, the people of the heavenly Qin continent turned ashen. Just 1 devil saint was enough to put the heavenly Qin continent in such a dangerous situation. Now that they had to face 8 devil saints, it was simply impossible for them to win. Even the rulers were dumbfounded. The heavenly pill ruler muttered softly with a pale face, "How is this possible? There are still 8 devil saints. God, do you really want to force the heavenly Qin continent into a dead end?" Who would have thought that after such a long battle with the Blood Demon continent, the strength that the Blood Demon continent had shown was only the tip of the iceberg? The other 8 devil saints didn't even make a move. In other words, the heavenly Qin continent wasn't actually fighting the entire Blood Demon continent, but only 1 devil saint among them. The entire army of demonic cultivators in this battle were actually warriors under Black-Winged Demon Saint's command. The other 8 devil saints didn't mobilize a single soldier. Even so, just 1 devil saint was enough to push the heavenly Qin continent to the brink of collapse. Impossible, this is impossible. How is this possible? After all this fighting, we're only fighting 1 devil saint. The entire Blood Demon continent didn't even use half of their strength. How is this possible? Some of the heavenly Qin continent warriors who weren't very determined were on the verge of collapse. Just as the people of the heavenly Qin continent turned ashen, the remaining 5 devil emperors laughed in unison. They were indeed defeated, but so what? Had the heavenly Qin continent won? No, because they had only defeated 1 devil saint of the Blood Demon continent. There were still 8 more devil saints waiting for them. Haha, do you think you've won? Dream on. The heavenly Qin continent will eventually submit to our Blood Demon continent. When the time comes, everyone on the heavenly Qin continent will be buried with Lord Devil Saint. Haha. The 5 devil emperors laughed loudly. Chapter 332. Hope was followed by complete despair. Along with the sneers of the 5 demon emperors, the hearts of the people of the heavenly Qin continent turned cold. 8 demon saints, there was no need to fight at all. With such a huge difference in strength, not to mention that the heavenly Qin continent did not have any saints, even if they did, they would not be a match for the 8 demon saints. Everyone was shocked. Only Shao Xing remained calm in the sky. Shao Chun already knew about the strength of the Blood Demon Continent. 3,000 years ago, the 9 demon saints of the Blood Demon Continent had joined forces to kill Shao Xing. Otherwise, how could 1 or 2 demon saints be a match for Shao Xing? Even so, Shao Chun was still able to severely injure all 9 of the great demon saints at the cost of his saintly death, forcing them back to the Blood Demon Continent and shattering the space tunnel at the same time. That was a testament to Shao Xing's strength. Looking at the hopeless people of the Heavenly Chun continent below, Shao Xing said calmly, "The 8 demon saints have not arrived yet. What are you all lamenting about? Hurry up and kill the remaining demon cultivators. This saint will deal with them." Shao Xing's words gave everyone a glimmer of hope. Shao Xing was the Heavenly Chun continent's last hope. Hearing Shao Xing's words, the rulers were the first to regain their wits. Now that things had come to this, there was no point in being afraid. Since Shao Xing had spoken, they naturally had to listen to the saint's orders. "Everyone, follow me." "So what if there are 8 demon saints? They haven't arrived yet," shouted the ruler of the continent of the 9 clouds. Then, he took the initiative to rush towards the remaining 5 demon emperors. Shao Xing did not intervene in the battle below. At this time, the Heavenly Chun continent had the absolute advantage. It was only a matter of time before they defeated the demon cultivators. What Shao Xing needed to do now was to destroy the space tunnel. He took a step forward and his figure appeared in front of the space tunnel. Shao Xing pointed his finger and a golden light shot out, instantly disappearing into the dark space tunnel. After the golden light entered, the space tunnel between the Blood Demon Continent and the Heavenly Chun Continent began to collapse inch by inch. In less than 100 breaths of time, the space tunnel had completely disappeared and the Blood Demon Seal was floating in the air. With a wave of his hand, the Blood Demon Seal slowly flew into Shao Xing's hand. Without hesitation, Shao Xing crushed the Blood Demon Seal. He had successfully destroyed the space tunnel, but this was only temporary. So, after doing all this, Shao Xing looked in the direction of Heavenly Chun Mountain. So, Shao Xing looked, too. Actually, 3,000 years ago, Shao Xing had already predicted this day's event. That was why he and Sky had secretly made arrangements. At the same time, he had forcefully left a wisp of his soul behind. He had predicted that the Blood Demon Continent would attack again. This time, the Blood Demon Continent would think that the Heavenly Chun Continent had no more saints. So, they would only send 1 demon saint. It was because the Blood Demon Continent had underestimated their enemy that the Heavenly Chun Continent had a chance of survival. Otherwise, with 9 demon saints descending at the same time, Shao Xing's wisp of soul and Sky would not be their match. He looked in the direction of Heavenly Chun Mountain. At the same time, in the Green Stone Palace, Sky was already prepared. He said calmly, "I hope that the Heavenly Chun Continent will be safe." Without any hesitation, Sky slowly formed a seal with his hands. As Sky Elder formed the seal, the entire Heavenly Chun Mountains array began to operate at an extremely fast speed. The array appeared. Lines of array runes covered every corner of Heavenly Chun Mountain. At the same time, the array began to expand. Soon, it spread in all directions. As the array spread, the battle in western Zhou City gradually came to an end. After 6 hours, the remnants of the demonic cultivators were completely wiped out. At the same time, the entire Heavenly Chun continent was enveloped by the array. An array that could envelop the entire Heavenly Chun continent was definitely the work of a supernatural being. However, because of the array's existence, the Heavenly Chun Mountains array disappeared. Sky Elder also disappeared along with it. It could be said that the array that enveloped the entire Heavenly Chun continent was created by Sky Elder. He sacrificed himself to activate all the energy of the Heavenly Chun Mountains array, thus forming an array that enveloped the entire Heavenly Chun continent. If one looked at the Heavenly Chun continent from the starry sky, one would be able to see that the entire heavenly Qin continent was enveloped by the array. There wasn't a single gap. Every corner of the continent was tightly protected. Looking at the array that was finally completed, Shaoxing looked sad for the first time. He murmured in a low voice, "Old man, wait for me. I'll be there soon." Knowing that Sky Elder had already disappeared, Shaoxing looked at the rulers of the continent of the 9 clouds and said calmly, "Come with me." Without waiting for the sovereigns to reply, Shaoxing raised his hand and an inexplicable force enveloped the sovereigns. Without any explanation, they were brought to the heavenly stellar mountain divine temple. The matter of the heavenly Qin continent had come to an end, but the 8 great demon saints of the blood demon continent were like 8 mountains pressing down on everyone's hearts. Now, they could only rely on Shaoxing. Just as the heavenly Qin continent was completely enveloped by Sky Elder's formation, in an ancient palace far above the blood demon continent, 8 illusory figures appeared one after another in the main hall. There were a total of 9 seats in the hall, which were arranged in a circle. However, at this time, only 8 of the seats were occupied. One of the seats was empty, and this seat was naturally the seat of the Black-Winged Demon Saint, who had already passed away. The 8 illusory figures who had gathered together were naturally the other 8 great devil saints of the blood demon continent. They had gathered here through the projection of their saint souls because of the death of the Black-Winged Devil Saint. One of them spoke first. "Black-Winged Demon Saint has passed away. I told you not to underestimate Shaoxing of the heavenly Qin continent. 3,000 years ago, we joined forces to besiege him, but we were still seriously injured. Now, how could Black-Winged Demon Saint be his opponent? Unfortunately, you didn't listen to me," said another great demon saint. Hearing this, another demon saint said in annoyance. At the beginning, this demon saint had said that they shouldn't underestimate the heavenly Qin continent, but the other demon saints didn't take it seriously, which led to the current situation. In the face of this great demon saint's words, the other great demon saints didn't refute. Indeed, this great demon saint had said not to underestimate the heavenly Qin continent, and with Shaoxing's ability and temperament, after the battle 3,000 years ago, even if he had passed away, it was impossible that he didn't have a backup plan. Laughing dryly, another great demon saint stepped forward and said, "All right, we did indeed underestimate the heavenly Qin continent, but things have already come to this point. It's useless to talk about it. Let's think of another way." Chapter 333. The 8 devil sages gathered together to think of other solutions. Hearing the words of this devil sage, another devil sage said in a bad mood, "What else can we do? Hei has already fallen, and the spatial passage has been destroyed. What else can we do?" The spatial passage to the heavenly Qin continent had already been destroyed by Shaoxing. As a result, it was impossible for the great demon saints to reopen the spatial passage. Hearing the great demon saint's words, the other great demon saints fell silent. After a while, the great demon saint who tried to mediate the situation said slowly, "We cannot give up on the heavenly Qin continent's origin energy. If we have the origin energy, we will have hope of breaking through to the quasi-saint realm. If there is no way to reopen the spatial passage, we will leave immediately and lead the army to the heavenly Qin continent." Without the spatial passage, they could only head to the heavenly Qin continent directly. Hearing this, the great demon saints looked at each other and one of them said, "From the blood demon continent to the heavenly Qin continent? Do you know how long it will take? It will take at least a few years. What else can we do? The blood demon continent does not have the origin energy. If we stay here, we will have no hope of breaking through to the quasi-saint realm. Although the heavenly Qin continent is a small place, it has the origin energy. If we can occupy the heavenly Qin continent, wouldn't it be better than staying in the blood demon continent? That is not unreasonable. I agree. In the blood demon continent we have no chance. It is better to head to the heavenly Qin continent." "If that is the case, I agree too. Without the spatial passage, the great demon saints decided to head to the heavenly Chen continent. Seeing that everyone agreed, the great demon saint who suggested this idea finally said, "All right, we will bring our own experts and depart to the heavenly Chen continent in a few days. As for the blood demon continent, we will leave some people to guard it." The 8 demon saints acted quickly. Demon Saint Black Wing had just died, but they had already made their decision. As the demon saint's voice fell, the 8 saint soul projections quickly disappeared from the hall. Obviously, the 8 demon saints were preparing to rush to the heavenly Chen continent. For the origin energy, they would pay any price because it was their only choice to break through to the quasi-saint realm. At the same time that the 8 holy demons made their decision, Shaoxing sat at the head of the shrines of the heavenly stellar mountain, while the sovereigns stood respectfully below Shaoxing. Although they had never seen Shaoxing before, it was all thanks to Shaoxing that they were able to kill Black Wing Saint. Moreover, as a saint, the sovereigns were naturally extremely respectful to Shaoxing. However, at the same time, the sovereigns were deeply worried. Although the space passage had been destroyed by Shaoxing, the 8 demon saints of the blood demon continent were like a scythe above the sovereigns' heads, making them unable to breathe for even a moment. Seeing the sovereign's thoughts, Shaoxing said indifferently, "Are you still worried about the 8 demon saints?" Reporting to the saint, "It is indeed difficult for us to deal with the 8 demon saint." Hearing Shaoxing's words, the ruler of heavenly fate did not hide anything from him. Indeed, the 8 demon saints were no longer something that the heavenly Chen continent could deal with. Moreover, when they were in close contact with Shaoxing, the sovereigns could feel that Shaoxing was not a living person. In addition, Black Wing Saint had said before his death that Shaoxing would not exist for long. Without Shaoxing, what could the heavenly Chen continent use to fight against the 8 demon saints? Hearing the ruler of heavenly fate's words, Shaoxing nodded slightly and said, "Indeed, the heavenly Chen continent cannot deal with the 8 demon saints. However, do not despair too much. The heavenly Chen continent still has a glimmer of hope." A glimmer of hope? Hearing this, the ruler of the continent of the 9 clouds asked doubtfully, "Do you see the formation in the sky? This formation has already enveloped the entire heavenly Chen continent, and it is the heavenly Chen continent's last glimmer of hope." Pointing at the formation in the sky, Shaoxing said indifferently, "This formation was created by Elder Tian." This was something that the sovereigns had already learned from Shaoxing. Now that they heard that this formation enveloped the entire heavenly Chen continent, it was the heavenly Chen continent's last glimmer of hope. They still did not understand Shaoxing's meaning. Seeing this, Shaoxing spoke again. "This formation was created by Elder Tian. You all already know this. With this formation, no one from the outside world can enter the heavenly Chen continent. Even if the 8 demon saints descend, this formation can block them." This formation can block the 8 demon saints? When the sovereigns heard that, they were overjoyed. If that was really the case, the heavenly Chen continent did not need to worry about the 8 demon saints descending, right? When Shaoxing saw that the sovereigns were overjoyed, he said indifferently, "But don't be happy too early. Although this array can stop the 8 great demon saints, it won't last forever. If the 8 great demon saints really descend, this array can only stop them for 100 years. After 100 years, the array will break and the 8 great demon saints will be able to descend upon the heavenly Chen continent. The formation couldn't protect the heavenly Chen continent forever. It would break eventually." When Shaoxing said that, he glanced at the sovereigns of the continent of the 9 clouds and paused for a few seconds before continuing. "Therefore, don't think that the formation is foolproof. This formation can only buy time. The only way to save the heavenly Chen continent is to rely on your own effort." "Rely on us?" asked the sovereigns suspiciously. "That's right. This array has already been formed and will be able to protect the heavenly Chen continent for 100 years. During this time, This saint will use the last of his strength to send all of you out of the heavenly Chun continent to the other continents. In this unfamiliar continent, all of you must break through to the Saint Realm as soon as possible, because only after breaking through to the Saint Realm will you have the ability to resist the 8 great demon saints. Of course, if you haven't broken through to the Saint layer in 100 years, you don't need to go back to the heavenly Chun continent. You can live on your own in another continent. It's a way of preserving the heavenly Chun continent's bloodline. According to Shaoxing, the sovereign's chances of breaking through to the Saint layer in the heavenly Chun continent were very low. Even though the heavenly Chun continent had original strength, it was impossible to break through to the Saint layer in a completely isolated place. If you didn't break through to the Saint layer, original strength was useless. Therefore, if they were sent to another continent, they would have a chance to break through to the Saint layer. That was the only way to save the heavenly Chun continent. If they could break through to the Saint layer in 100 years, they could go back to the heavenly Chun continent. At that time, even if the formation was broken, they would be able to resist the 8 demon saints. If they couldn't break through to the Saint layer in 100 years, they wouldn't need to go back to the heavenly Chun continent. They could just live on in another continent. Hearing Shaoxing's words, the rulers fell silent. They felt helpless, but they knew that this was the only way. The one who started the trouble should end it. If they wanted to resolve the crisis of the heavenly Chun continent, they could only rely on themselves. The only thing Shaoxing could do was buy them more time. Chapter 334. They could never place their safety in the hands of external forces. Only when they were strong enough could they deter the wolves, insects, tigers, and leopards that coveted them. Just think about it, if the heavenly Chun continent had over 10 saints, then even if the blood demon continent knew that the heavenly Chun continent had source energy, they would not dare to provoke them. Why? Because the heavenly Chun continent was stronger than the blood demon continent. Even if the heavenly Chun continent had treasures that the blood demon continent coveted, the saints of the blood demon continent would not dare to have any evil thoughts. It was a pity that the heavenly Chun continent did not have any saint. Therefore, without enough strength, they had treasures that everyone coveted. It was easy to imagine how they ended up like this. To forge iron, one has to be strong. What happened to the heavenly Chun continent this time is because we are too weak. If you want to protect the heavenly Chun continent, you have to rely on your own strength. Other than that, everything else is meaningless. Shaoxing said flatly as he looked at the sovereigns. This time, the heavenly Chun continent was protected by the heavenly Chun continent for 100 years to give everyone time to grow. This time, Shaoxing was prepared to send a large number of people out of the heavenly Chun continent. There were tens of thousands of people. It could be said that as long as they were talented, Shaoxing planned to send them out and let them grow. As for whether they could protect the heavenly Chun continent in the end, it would depend on their own abilities. Hearing Shaoxing's words, the rulers fell silent. In the end, Shaoxing only left a sentence before disappearing into the shrines. There are a total of 50,000 people. As for who you choose, it is up to you. They are the hope of the heavenly Chun continent. You can decide for yourselves. I don't have much time. There must be a result within 3 days. When the time comes, bring them all to the heavenly Chun mountain. Shaoxing could only send out 50,000 people at most. Although these people left the heavenly Chun continent, they were the hope of the heavenly Chun continent. They grew up in a foreign land to protect the heavenly Chun continent. If these people failed, the heavenly Chun continent would have no future to speak of. With that, Shaoxing disappeared into the shrines. Then, the rulers looked at each other and nodded heavily. Shaoxing was right. He had done his best to give the heavenly Chun continent a chance of survival. As for whether they could seize this chance, it was up to them. Time was of the essence. Just as the sovereigns were about to take action, Shaoxing arrived at Western Pass City alone. There was someone he wanted to meet here. Strolling through the streets of Western Pass City, Xiao Chen and the others already knew that the Blood Demon continent still had 8 demon saints. Everyone was in low spirit. At this moment, Xiaoxing's figure appeared in front of Xiao Chen and the others without any warning. Facing Xiaoxing, everyone recognized him at a glance. They all bowed and said, "Greetings, Saint." Xiaoxing's expression didn't change much in the face of everyone's greetings. His gaze was fixed on Xiao Chen from the beginning to the end. As they were of the same bloodline, Xiaoxing had already felt the power of Xiao Chen's bloodline. It was so familiar. Looking at Xiao Chen, Xiaoxing's eyes revealed a touch of gentleness. This was a descendant of the Xiao family. It could be said that he was Xiaoxing's descendant. Smiling at Xiao Chen, Xiaoxing spoke. "Little fellow, what's your name?" Reporting to Saint, Junior's name is Xiao Chen. In response to Xiaoxing's question, Xiao Chen replied in a neither servile nor overbearing manner. Xiao Chen. Not bad, not bad. Follow me." Hearing Xiao Chen's reply, Xiaoxing softly muttered to himself. Then, with a wave of his hand, he disappeared with Xiao Chen. Xiao Chen didn't allow him to refuse. Of course, facing Xiaoxing, Xiao Chen didn't want to refuse. Perhaps it was because they were of the same bloodline, but when facing Xiaoxing, Xiao Chen instinctively felt a sense of closeness. He didn't bring Xiao Chen to any other place. Instead, he brought Xiao Chen directly to the Xiao family in Lingshan province. Standing proudly in the clouds, Xiaoxing looked down at the Xiao family with a complicated gaze. "Do you know who I am?" Hearing Xiaoxing's words, Xiao Chen shook his head. Although he felt a sense of closeness to Xiaoxing, he didn't know Xiaoxing's identity. Seeing Xiao Chen shake his head, Xiaoxing said indifferently, "You should know me because you've been to the ancestral land. My name is Xiaoxing." Hearing the 2 words Xiaoxing, Xiao Chen was stunned. Xiaoxing was the ancestor of the Xiao family, and also his ancestor. He stared blankly at Xiaoxing. Xiao Chen didn't know what to say, but his heart was filled with questions. Xiaoxing smiled faintly. His smile was filled with reminiscence. As if he could see the doubts in Xiao Chen's heart, Xiaoxing slowly spoke. "This is the ancestral land of the Xiao family. 3,000 years ago, this place was known as the Holy City. The Xiao family prospered here and once ruled the entire heavenly Qin continent. Every year, various forces would come here to worship. Thinking back, this place was so glorious. Every member of the Xiao family could be said to be a dragon among men. However, the Xiao family couldn't escape the law of decline after reaching the pinnacle of prosperity. Time erased the glory of the Xiao family and buried the glorious history of the Xiao family. The holy city became an ordinary city in the heavenly Qin continent." Xiaoxing seemed to be talking to himself, but Xiao Chen could hear a strong sense of reminiscence from his words. He didn't expect the Xiao family to have such a glorious past. Just thinking about it made Xiao Chen feel as if he saw a huge family entrenched in the holy city. There were many experts in the Xiao family, and the younger generations were all extraordinary. Every member of the Xiao family was dignified and respected by thousands. Xiaoxing used his words to show Xiao Chen the scene of the Xiao family's glory 3,000 years ago. Imitating Xiaoxing, Xiao Chen sized up the Lingshan County city and the Xiao family from the sky. If it weren't for Xiaoxing's words, Xiao Chen would have a hard time connecting the holy city 3,000 years ago with the current Lingshan County city. The two shouldn't have the slightest connection at all. Xiao Chen was in a daze. At this moment, Xiaoxing continued. "In the battle 3,000 years ago, following my death and the fall of many experts in the Xiao family, the Xiao family's decline was a foregone conclusion. But now I see hope again." Xiaoxing shifted his gaze to Xiao Chen. His eyes were filled with gratification as he said, "You are a descendant of the Xiao family. You are my descendant, Xiaoxing's descendant. Looking at you, I see hope for the Xiao family to regain its glory." The decline of the Xiao clan filled Xiaoxing's heart with a myriad of emotions. However, after seeing Xiao Chen, the fire of hope reignited in Shao Xing's heart. Although Shao Xing would not be able to exist for much longer, he believed that as long as Shao Chen was around, the Shao clan would definitely be able to return to its peak, or even be more glorious than it was at its peak. Chapter 335. Shao Xing saw hope in Shao Chen, the hope for the Shao clan to rise again. This was because Shao Xing felt the sacred bloodline that belonged to the Shao clan from Shao Chen. Humans could also possess the power of bloodline. This sounded very funny. However, it was true. The bloodline of a clan would undergo a qualitative change as long as an ancestor had made a breakthrough into the sage realm. And his descendants would also possess the bloodline power of demon beasts. This bloodline was called the sacred bloodline by the common people. Only saint-rank gentry clans could possess the sacred bloodline, and those who possessed the sacred bloodline were basically geniuses. It was precisely because of this that saint-rank gentry clans had been able to maintain their prosperity. However, with the passage of time, the sacred bloodline would become thinner with every generation. If no new saints were born for a long time, perhaps the sacred bloodline of this saint-rank gentry clan would be cut off after a few hundred years, just like the Shao clan. Since Shao Xing's death 3,000 years ago, the Shao clan had not produced a new saint. Not to mention a saint, even a Dao emperor had not appeared. After such a long time, the Shao clan's sacred bloodline had long been exhausted. However, there were variables in everything. As the descendants of a saint, the Shao clan was born with the genes of the sacred bloodline, but it was very thin. Among saint-rank gentry clans, there was an even more heaven-defying existence, and that was bloodline atavism. As the name implied, bloodline atavism meant that the descendants of a saint would have their bloodline mutated, and the bloodline power would have the power of their saint ancestors. Any descendant of a saint who could possess bloodline atavism was an extremely heaven-defying existence. As long as it was a descendant of a saint with bloodline atavism, they would definitely be able to break through to the saint realm and become a saint. Just this alone was terrifying enough. Moreover, the bloodline power of a saint's descendant who had undergone atavism was practically equivalent to that of a saint's ancestor. Using the power of the bloodline, they could easily suppress any of their clansmen, ignoring the suppression of cultivation. It could be said that if a member of a saint-rank clan had a bloodline reversion, the bloodline power of the entire clan would recover to varying degrees. It could be said that if a member of a declining sacred clan had an ancestral awakening bloodline, he would be the hope for the clan to rise again. Shao Chen was the Shao clan's ancestral awakening bloodline. It was no exaggeration to say that as long as Shao Chen did not fall, he would definitely become a saint in the future. In other words, even if Shao Chen did not leave the heavenly Chen continent, he could still become a saint. However, Shao Xing did not plan on letting Shao Chen stay in the heavenly Chen continent. From Shao Xing's point of view, only by going out and personally seeing the prosperity of the outside world could one truly grow up. A flower that grew up in a greenhouse, even if one became a saint in the future, would still be trash. Shao Xing did not tell Shao Chen about the ancestral awakening bloodline. It was useless to tell him about it. From Shao Xing's point of view, the sacred clan's bloodline was only a higher starting point for the descendants of the sacred clan. As for how far they could grow in the future, it was still up to them. One must always remember that the sacred clan's bloodline was a gift from the heavens. It could allow one to have a higher starting point and be more outstanding than others from birth. However, it was also because of this that in the saint-rank clan, where geniuses gathered, the competition was even more intense and cruel. While possessing extraordinary talent, one also had to put in more effort. Shao Xing looked down at the Shao clan indifferently. After a while, he slowly opened his mouth and said, "Let's go. Ancestor, don't you want to go down and see your clansmen?" Seeing that Shao Xing was about to leave, Shao Chen asked. Since he had already come to the Shao clan, and judging from Shao Xing's expression, It was obvious that he had deep feelings for the Shao clan. Why not go down and see the descendants of the clan? Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Shao Xing smiled faintly and said, I don't have much time left. I can no longer be of any help to the Shao clan. What difference does it make whether I meet them or not? It will only add to the sorrow. In the end, you all still have to walk your own path in the future. The glory I brought to the Shao clan is already in the past. The future will depend on your own efforts. He only wanted to see the current Shao clan from afar. As for meeting them, it was better to forget about it. After saying that, without waiting for Xiao Chen to reply, Shao Xing waved his hand and led Xiao Chen away. No one knew that Shao Xing had come. On the way back, Shao Xing wanted to use the last days of his life to visit some old places and see those old friends who had passed away. As for Xiao Chen, he was worried about Qin Shi. Thus, Shao Xing directly sent Xiao Chen back to Nine Firmaments Palace. Outside Nine Firmaments Palace, Shao Xing brought Xiao Chen there. Looking at him, he smiled and said, Go. Remember to go to Heavenly Stellar Mountain in 3 days. Shao Xing's expression was gentle. Hearing those words, Xiao Chen understood that after this farewell, he might not be able to see this ancestor again. A feeling of sorrow welled up in his heart. Sensing the change in Xiao Chen's expression, Shao Xing spoke calmly. There's no need for that. I don't belong to this era. Now that I can see the hometown I once lived in, I am already very satisfied. Alright, go quickly. There's no need to feel sad for me. Shao Xing appeared very carefree in the face of his impending death. After saying that, he ignored Xiao Chen, who was still in a daze. Shao Xing turned around and disappeared from where he stood. It had been 3,000 years. His old friends had long turned into piles of dirt. He stood there in a daze. After a long while, a complicated look flashed across Xiao Chen's eyes. He seemed to have understood something. Perhaps to Shao Xing, he only appeared because he wanted to protect the heavenly stellar continent. At the same time, Shao Xing himself said that he did not belong to this era. In Shao Xing's eyes, he had already experienced what he needed to experience. He also had a life that belonged to him alone. Shao Xing was once young and crazy with his companions. In the end, he became a powerhouse of his generation. Now, Shao Xing could no longer find a reason to exist in this world. The rotation of the heaven and earth was just like an incomparably gigantic roulette that spun slowly without a single moment of rest. Within the rotation of this roulette, generations of geniuses were born before vanishing into the long river of time. Shao Xing had his own stage, but now that his stage had come to an end, and Shao Xing's life had come to an end. As for the new stage now, it belonged to Xiao Chen and the other younger generation. Xiao Chen took a deep breath and looked in the direction Shao Xing left. He whispered to himself, even if I become a saint, I can't escape the reincarnation of fate? I don't know what level I have to reach before I can escape the reincarnation of heaven and earth and truly control my own fate. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 336. At that very moment, Shao Chen suddenly felt the terror of fate. Although it could not be seen or touched, fate truly existed. No one could escape the cycle of fate. Perhaps, from the moment a person was born, they were already inside the vortex of fate. Be it a proud saint or an ordinary person without any cultivation base, they were already inside the vortex of fate. There was no way to escape or hide from it. For the current Shao Chen, fate was too mysterious and profound. What he said just now was just an expression of his feelings. Perhaps even a saint, or even a quasi-saint or a supreme saint, would not be able to completely understand the mysteries of fate. Without thinking too much about it, Chen Xiaoyan turned and walked towards Heavenly Sword Peak. There was nothing Shao Chen could do to change Shao Xing's situation. Or rather, letting nature take its course was the best outcome for Shao Xing. Along the way to Heavenly Sword Peak, Chen Xiaoyan saw that many of Nine Firmaments Palace's disciples had fallen due to the repeated battles. Thus, Nine Firmaments Palace appeared somewhat miserable. Of course, it was not just Nine Firmaments Palace. All the forces in heavenly Chen mainland were in the same state. Chen Xiaoyan headed straight for the Immaculate Residence. After spending nearly 2 months fighting outside, Xiao Chen was very worried about Qin Shuru. Naturally, Xiao Chen was also worried about Hundred Flowers Ferry. After confirming that Qin Shuru was fine, he planned to head to Heavenly Dan Valley tomorrow to pick up Hundred Flowers Ferry. After all, Xiao Chen had not seen Hundred Flowers Ferry since entering the 5 Elemental Dao Palace. He already had a plan in mind. However, to Xiao Chen's surprise, the moment he stepped into the Immaculate Residence, 2 peerless beauties walked towards him. They were none other than Qin Shuru and Hundred Flowers Fairy. Seeing Hundred Flowers Fairy, Xiao Chen was taken aback. He did not expect to see her here. Hundred Flowers Fairy bowed slightly to Xiao Chen and said with a smile, "Your servant did not see young master in Heavenly Dan Valley. A few days ago, Big Sister Shui Ro personally went to Heavenly Dan Valley to pick me up. I hope young master will not blame me." Was it Qin Shuru who brought Fairy of 100 Flowers to Tiandan Valley? Upon hearing this, Xiao Chen looked at Qin Shuru in confusion. What was going on? Would Qin Shuru personally go to the Tiandan Valley to bring Fairy of 100 Flowers here? Facing Xiao Chen's gaze, Qin Shuru said coldly, "Your little lover is out there. If I don't help you bring her back, won't you be worried?" Upon hearing this, Xiao Chen immediately knew that Qin Shuru knew about his relationship with Flower Fairy. Xiao Chen was not surprised by this. After all, many people knew that Flower Fairy had taken a blow for him back in 5 Element City. Seeing that Qin Shuru's expression did not look too good, Xiao Chen stepped forward with a smile and held Qin Shuru's hand. "Madam is so thoughtful, haha." Xiao Chen did not tell Qin Shuru about the Flower Fairy because he was not in the mood to think about it after what happened at the Sky Sword Peak. Now that Qin Shuru knew about it herself, she was obviously jealous. Xiao Chen tried to please Qin Shuru with a smile, but Qin Shuru did not buy it at all. In this regard, Fairy of 100 Flowers did not say anything and only looked at the two with a smile. In fact, Fairy of 100 Flowers had been in the Dustless Residence for almost half a month. All along, Qin Shuru had treated her well. But now that he saw Xiao Chen, Qin Shuru naturally wanted to warn Xiao Chen that he should think carefully if he wanted to fool around outside in the future. Qin Shuru shook off Xiao Chen's hand and stepped forward to pull Fairy of 100 Flowers away. He simply said a few words and left. "Find a place to sleep tonight." Being pulled away by Qin Shuru, Fairy of 100 Flowers turned to Xiao Chen and made a helpless expression. Watching the 2 women leave, Xiao Chen was confused for a moment. What's going on? Are the 2 women on the same side? I actually became the target of their attack. He still did not know what happened to the 2 women during this period. Of course, Xiao Chen did not know that Qin Shuru actually did not hate Fairy of 100 Flowers. How to put it, Fairy of 100 Flowers was not only educated and reasonable, but even though she used to be a person of the mortal world, Fairy of 100 Flowers was still clean and honest. More importantly, Fairy of 100 Flowers truly liked Xiao Chen. Therefore, Qin Shuru naturally did not hate her. The reason for this was only because of Qin Shuru's temper as a woman. Xiao Chen sighed helplessly as he was directly targeted by the 2 women. But this was also good. Fairy of 100 Flowers had also come to the Dustless Residence, so he did not have to go to the Heavenly Dan Valley alone, nor did he have to explain anything to Qin Shuru. As for the little temper in Qin Shuru's heart, he could only coax her. For the whole day, Qin Shuru gave Xiao Chen the cold shoulder. Only Fairy of 100 Flowers would still smile gently at Xiao Chen. Xiao Chen did not cultivate. This day, Xiao Chen followed behind Qin Shuru. The 2 women were chatting in the garden. Xiao Chen went up to them and said with a smile, "Madam, I brought some spirit fruit. Have some, they taste really good." "I'm not eating." Hearing Xiao Chen's words and seeing him come over with a plate of spirit fruits, Qin Shuru directly refused in a bad mood. Being ruthlessly rejected by Qin Shuru, Xiao Chen was not angry and simply sat down beside him. Seeing this, Qin Shuru gave him a fierce glare. In this way, Qin Shuru's anger slowly subsided when night fell. He and Xiao Chen sat opposite each other in the room. Fairy of 100 Flowers had already returned to her room to rest. Looking at Xiao Chen in front of him, Qin Shuru said coldly, "Do you really know that you were wrong?" "I really do." Hearing Qin Shuru's words, Xiao Chen replied with a face full of sincerity. "Who would believe you? Madam, I am your husband. If you don't even believe me, then who can you believe?" Facing Qin Shuru's cold face, Xiao Chen took the initiative to move closer. Just as he finished speaking, without waiting for Qin Shuru's consent, he picked her up and walked towards the bed. Being forcefully held in Xiao Chen's arms, Qin Shuru coldly shouted, "Let go of me." "I won't let go. People say that absence makes the heart grow fonder. Madam, please accept your husband." The night was silent. That night, Xiao Chen used all his means to finally make Qin Shuru's jealousy disappear completely. The next morning, Qin Shuru leaned on Xiao Chen's chest. From Xiao Chen, she already knew that Xiao Sheng was preparing to send the people of the Tianshan continent to other continents. Her eyes were filled with anxiety as she spoke. "Husband, do you think the outside world will be very dangerous?" "It won't be. You have me." Hearing Qin Shuru's words, Xiao Chen smiled and replied. After successfully comforting Qin Shuru, Xiao Chen was in a good mood. However, such peaceful days obviously wouldn't last for long. At noon, a peak master personally came to the Wuchen residence and told Xiao Chen that everyone would be heading to Tianshan Mountain tomorrow morning to prepare to leave the Tianshan continent. He asked Xiao Chen to prepare. Qin Shuru, Fairy of 100 Flowers, and even Qing Yao and Qing Luo had received a spot. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 337. The rulers took special care of Xiao Chen. Basically, anyone who was related to Xiao Chen was given a spot to leave the heavenly Chen continent. It wasn't just Qing Yao and Qing Luo. Most of the members of the Xiao family also received a spot to leave the heavenly Chen continent. They were currently on their way to the 9 Firmaments Palace. They would head to the heavenly Chen mountain with Xiao Chen the next morning. Of course, it wasn't just Xiao Chen. The other proud monarchs were the same. After all, they were the most talented people in the heavenly Chen continent. It was understandable that they were given preferential treatment. There were a total of 50,000 slots. To the sovereigns, selecting these slots wasn't too difficult a task. The 7 overlords took the majority of the slots, which was 30,000. The other major powers would then divide the remaining 20,000 slots. Everyone knew the purpose of leaving the heavenly Chen continent. Therefore, many people also understood that those who left the heavenly Chen continent were the most talented people. Those who were nearing the end of their lifespans or had no hope of breaking through to a higher realm naturally didn't want to leave the heavenly Chen continent. This was because they wouldn't be of much use if they left. They might as well stay in the heavenly Chen continent. After all, there wouldn't be any danger in the heavenly Chen continent for the next 100 years. As for what would happen after that, who could say for sure? In just 2 days the spots were basically confirmed. After sending off the peak master who came to report, Xiao Chen and Qin Shuru went to the bamboo pavilion in the garden and sat down. Looking at Xiao Chen, Qin Shuru asked worriedly, "Husband, do you know where we'll be sent to?" Qin Shuru was still a little nervous about going to a completely unfamiliar continent. Hearing this, Xiao Chen shook his head and said, "I don't know." He didn't know where Xiao Sheng planned to send them. Moreover, not to mention Xiao Chen, even the rulers probably didn't know anything about the world outside the heavenly Chen continent. For thousands of years, the heavenly Chun continent was like an abandoned paradise. It was completely cut off from the outside world. Perhaps it was because of this that no saints were born in the heavenly Chun continent for so many years. Blindly building a chariot behind closed doors was obviously not beneficial to the development of a continent. Over time, it would even cause the martial arts of the continent to wither. Because if one did not interact with the outside world, one's vision would become narrower and narrower. This was a very terrifying thing. When you think you're invincible in the world, you don't know that you're just an ant in the outside world. Just think about how ridiculous it was. For the past 1,000 years, the heavenly Chun continent felt like a frog at the bottom of a well. This could be seen from the fact that the Tao Emperor Realm Almighty called himself a ruler. It was indeed a little ignorant. Of course, after experiencing this battle, all the sovereigns had clearly realized this problem. So, they'd put down the arrogance in their hearts after the battle. Because they knew that the Tao Emperor Realm was nothing, because there were existences above the Tao Emperor Realm, and they were existences that had truly transcended the mortal realm. Moreover, saints weren't the strongest. There were still quasi-saints and great saints above them. After they recognized their own strengths, the sovereigns seemed to feel yearning towards the martial Tao once more. In the past, the sovereigns thought that the Tao Emperor Realm was the strongest, but now they knew that there were even stronger existences above the Tao Emperor Realm, and the Saint Realm had clearly become the goal of all the sovereigns. It wasn't just to protect the heavenly Chun continent, but also because the rulers wanted to become saints and climb to the peak of the martial Tao. Therefore, their state of mind had changed. Shao Qin was looking forward to going to a completely new world. He wanted to see just how strong the young geniuses from other continents were. He also wanted to see just how strong he, the king of geniuses from the Tiantian continent, would be on the path to becoming a king of geniuses. Seeing the anticipation in Shao Qian's eyes, Qin Shuru didn't ask any more questions. Although he was a little nervous about leaving the heavenly Chun continent, Qin Shuru wasn't afraid as long as Shao Qian was by his side. Just as Shao Qian and Qin Shuru were chatting, 100 Flower Fairy slowly walked over. She bowed slightly to the two and called out softly, "Greetings, young master and madam." She was very clear about Qin Shuru's position in Shao Qian's heart. Therefore, 100 Flower Fairy had always been extremely respectful to Qin Shuru. She didn't have the slightest intention of competing with Qin Shuru for favor. This was one of the important reasons why Qin Shuru could accept 100 Flower Fairy. She was sensible, and more importantly, she understood the big picture. If Fairy of 100 Flowers was a scheming woman, Qin Shuru would never have accepted her. She would have even killed Fairy of 100 Flowers before Shao Qian returned. Nodding slightly to 100 Flower Fairy, before Shao Qian could speak, Qin Shuru spoke first. "Sister, have a seat." Hearing Qin Shuru's words, 100 Flower Fairy sat down next to Shao Qian. Then, Qin Shuru spoke again. "From now on, we'll be a family. Sister, you don't have to be so polite. Just be a little more casual. But there's one thing you need to pay special attention to, and that is to keep a close eye on him. I can see that this person has too many admirers. I don't want to have a house full of them in the future." These words were a sign that Qin Shuru had completely accepted 100 Flower Fairy. However, being able to accept 100 Flower Fairy didn't mean that Qin Shuru could accept other women. Hearing Qin Shuru's words, 100 Flower Fairy smiled and nodded. "Sister, don't worry. I'll definitely keep a close eye on Gongzi. If Gongzi brings back other women in the future, I'll definitely stand on your side." With just a few words, the two women had completely joined forces. It seemed that if he were to bring other women back in the future, he would not be able to live his life anymore. Of course, Shao Qian was not the kind of person who could not move after seeing a beautiful woman. He laughed heartily and said without a care, "Ha ha ha. Madams, you must be joking. With the two of you, I'm already satisfied. Naturally, I won't go provoke other women in the future. Madams, don't worry. These were Xiao Chen's heartfelt words. Qin Shuru and Hundred Flower Fairy were peerless beauties capable of causing the downfall of nations. In the entire heavenly Chen mainland, there was no man who could resist the charms of the two women. And now, Xiao Chen had two beauties. If he still wasn't satisfied, then he would be too greedy. The matter between the two women was completely resolved. On the same night, Xiao Qing and Bai Ruiyu led over 100 Xiao family disciples to the Immaculate Abode. Xiao Chen naturally didn't know about the sudden arrival of Xiao Qing and the others. In the end, it was only after Xiao Qing's explanation that Xiao Chen found out that the Xiao family was also leaving the heavenly Chen mainland. This time, the experts from 9 Firmaments Palace had specially come to fetch them. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 338. The entire Xiao family had received a total of 200 slots. Therefore, as long as the Xiao family members were talented, they would all come to the Immaculate Residence, preparing to follow Xiao Chen to the heavenly stellar mountain tomorrow. Xiao Chen was naturally very grateful to the rulers for taking such good care of the Xiao family. To be able to give the small Xiao family 200 slots was already an extremely extravagant matter. Furthermore, to be able to go to other continents for training was a great opportunity for the Xiao family. Although the outside world was clearly more dangerous than the heavenly stellar continent, it was also easier to break through to a higher realm. This would depend on one's choice. Do you want to climb to the peak of the martial path, or do you want to live an ordinary life? However, as long as one was a person with courage, they would naturally want to climb to the peak of the martial path and become a powerhouse. Xiao Chen arranged accommodations for everyone in the heavenly sword peak. As for Xiao Qing and Bai Ruiyu, they were left in the Immaculate Residence by Xiao Chen. At night, Xiao Chen's family, Qin Shuru, and Fairy Bai Hua sat together, eating spiritual fruits and drinking tea while chatting. The atmosphere was very harmonious. This was probably a rare reunion for Xiao Chen's family. After all, Xiao Chen had only returned to the Xiao family once after leaving home for so many years. Xiao Qing and Bai Ruiyu did not dislike Fairy Bai Hua in the slightest. After all, as parents, to have a beautiful and obedient daughter-in-law like Fairy Bai Hua was definitely a wonderful thing. In their opinion, as long as Qin Shuru could accept her, there would naturally be no problems for them. The family chatted until late into the night before returning to their rooms to rest. The next morning, just as the sky lit up, the sound of a bell rang out in 9 Firmaments Palace. Following the sound of the bell, everyone rushed to the main square of 9 Firmaments Palace's 9 peaks. Today, they would be heading to the heavenly stellar mountain and leaving the heavenly stellar continent. On the main square of the Sky Sword Peak, there were not many survivors after the calamity that befell the Sky Sword Peak. Therefore, almost all of the people gathered on the main square of the Sky Sword Peak were from the Xiao clan, led by Xiao Chen. Xiao Chen stayed by his mother's side. To be honest, he was very worried about Bai Ruiyu's departure from the Tianqian continent. His mother's cultivation was not high to begin with. She was only in the celestial realm. Moreover, Bai Ruiyu's cultivation was almost entirely built up through the use of treasures. Her combat strength was at the bottom of the same realm. Moreover, Bai Ruiyu had almost never fought before, so her combat experience was almost zero. As such, if she were to head to a completely unfamiliar continent and encounter danger, Bai Ruiyu's ability to survive would be very, very low. He wanted to persuade Bai Ruiyu to stay in the heavenly Chen continent, but Xiao Chen understood that he could use treasures to push Bai Ruiyu's cultivation to the heaven realm, but what about after that? Could he use treasures to push Bai Ruiyu to the Dao King realm or the Dao Sovereign realm? It was obviously very difficult. Without cultivation, Bai Ruiyu's lifespan would be very short. Xiao Chen did not want to see his mother turn into a pile of dust after 100 years. Therefore, even though he was worried about Bai Ruiyu's safety, Xiao Chen could not find a reason to persuade her. When the time came, he could only ensure by Ryue's safety. Moreover, he did not know what the outside world was like. Who could be sure that the outside world would be extremely dangerous? With that thought, Xiao Chen gradually calmed down. After waiting for around an hour on the main square of the Sky Sword Peak, a Tao King Realm expert from the Blood Blade Peak arrived. At the same time, a dozen flying demonic beasts slowly descended on the main square of the Sky Sword Peak. Greetings, King Bewitching Sword. The flying demonic beasts have been prepared. We can set off at any time. The Tao King Realm expert was in charge of receiving the members of the Xiao family. However, he was extremely respectful towards Xiao Chen. Hearing the Tao King Realm expert's words, Xiao Chen returned the greeting. Thank you, Senior. I will have to trouble you. King Bewitching Sword is too courteous. The two of them exchanged some pleasantries. Then, Xiao Chen ordered the members of the Xiao family to board the eagle demonic beasts beside him. After that, over 10 demonic beasts soared into the sky and flew towards the heavenly stellar mountain. In the entire 9 Firmaments Palace, anyone with a little bit of strength and talent would have to leave the heavenly stellar continent. After Xiao Chen and the others left, many demonic beasts soared into the sky from the other 8 peaks. As for the cultivators above the Tao Querying Realm, they all flew into the sky. After the members of 9 Firmaments Palace left, the entire 9 Firmaments Palace fell silent. At present, all the experts of 9 Firmaments Palace had left. Only the old, the weak, the sick, and the disciples who did not have outstanding talent remained. They did not leave the heavenly stellar continent. Instead, they continued to cultivate in 9 Firmaments Palace. Similar to 9 Firmaments Palace, the other 7 overlords also made their way towards the heavenly stellar mountain. Countless flying demonic beasts were converging towards the heavenly stellar mountain from all directions. The last time the experts gathered at the heavenly stellar mountain, it was to fight against the army of demonic cultivators. This time, they gathered at the heavenly stellar mountain again to leave the heavenly stellar continent. Of course, they were not leaving to escape. Rather, they were leaving to fight for the future of the heavenly stellar continent. Rushing with all their might, after half a day, Xiao Chen and the others finally arrived at the heavenly stellar mountain. Just as Xiao Chen and the others stepped onto the peak of the heavenly stellar mountain, the other king of prides arrived as well. Long Qing and Chen Ling had also rushed over from the Yao Beast Empire. Seeing Xiao Chen, Chen Ling and Long Qing immediately surrounded him. Chen Ling whispered, "Little brother, you must be careful when you go to the outside world. The heavenly stellar continent cannot be compared to that place." If there was anyone who knew about the outside world, it was none other than Chen Ling. Hearing Chen Ling's words, Xiao Chen nodded his head slightly. Then, Chen Ling told Xiao Chen some things to take note of. According to the memories of his previous life, Chen Ling told Xiao Chen about the outside world. Although he did not know which continent Xiao Xing would send them to, after thinking about it, it should at least be a continent with a saint. Otherwise, there would be no need to leave the heavenly stellar continent at all. They would definitely be sent to a continent with a saint. As such, according to Chen Ling's memories, such a continent would usually be very large. It would be at least 10 times the size of the heavenly stellar continent. At the same time, because of the saint's arrogance, such a continent could be said to be filled with saint clans. It was not as peaceful as the heavenly stellar continent. The various saint clans, saint sects, and saint empires would often have conflicts with each other. As such, they had to be extra careful. Generally speaking, a continent with a saint's arrogance was much more chaotic than the heavenly stellar continent. The rules were also not as strict as the heavenly stellar continent. In this chaotic world, the only thing that was pursued was strength. Whoever was stronger, whoever had the biggest fist, would have the right to speak. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 339. He told Xiao Chen a few things to take note of in detail. Of course, Qin Shuru, 100 Flower Fairy, and the other prodigies kings had gathered around Chen Ling as well. They'd all heard Chen Ling's words. They were rather puzzled that Chen Ling actually knew so much about the outside world. However, since Chen Ling didn't explain, they naturally didn't ask any further questions. After learning all this, Xiao Chen immediately told Qin Shuru and Hundred Flower Fairy to tell his parents and the other members of the Xiao clan what Chen Ling had just said so that they would have a better understanding of the outside world. Just like Xiao Chen, the other prodigies kings all returned to their respective clans or sects after hearing Chen Ling's words. They told the people around them everything that Chen Ling had told them to take note of. While everyone had gathered at Heavenly Stellar Mountain and was waiting for Xiao Xing to appear, the 7 rulers had also gathered at the shrines of Heavenly Stellar Mountain. Unlike the others, heading to the other continents this time wasn't very dangerous to the sovereigns. So long as they were careful and didn't offend saints, then their safety shouldn't be a problem. After all the sovereigns were Dao Emperor Realm experts. Even if they headed to the continents in the outside world where saints looked down upon, only saints and half-saints could kill them with ease. So, all the sovereigns had the ability to protect themselves if they encountered other experts. To the rulers, their only goal was to break through to the saint realm. This was what they cared about the most, so they didn't care about the things that Chen Ling had told them to take note of. Everyone was waiting for Xiao Xing. While everyone was gathered at Heavenly Stellar Mountain, within an unknown mountain range in the central divine realm, there was a deep gorge. The gorge had an extremely beautiful environment. There was a small stream, a flower field, and a lone grave that was covered in weeds. At this moment, Xiao Xing was sitting with his back against the lone grave. He looked at the indecipherable words on the tombstone. Xiao Xing revealed a trace of reluctance and said, "Aunt Hong, it's about time. I should go as well." No one knew who Aunt Hong was because she was someone from 3,000 years ago. At the same time, she was one of Xiao Xing's wives. After waking up, Xiao Xing went to the burial grounds of many of his old friends. Memories from the distant past constantly surged into Xiao Xing's mind. All of the people who had followed Xiao Xing in the past had left one by one. Only Xiao Xing's remnant soul remained in this world. However, this remnant soul was about to disappear today. Before it disappeared, Xiao Xing could only do one last thing for the Heavenly Stellar Continent. He could only plant a seed of hope for the Heavenly Stellar Continent. As for whether this seed could germinate and grow, it was not something that Xiao Xing could control. He was tired. There were many things that he wanted to do but lacked the strength to do so. Naturally, no one could answer Xiao Xing. He stood up and gently touched the tombstone. It felt just like how he gently touched Aunt Hong's cheek 3,000 years ago. A faint smile appeared on his face. Then, Xiao Xing resolutely turned around and took a step forward. His figure instantly disappeared from where he stood. With just a step, Xiao Xing had already left Aunt Hong's grave and arrived at Heavenly Stellar Mountain. The people who were originally waiting for Xiao Xing appeared. The 8 sovereigns immediately appeared and bowed respectfully to Xiao Xing. "Greetings, Saint. Is everyone here?" Facing the sovereigns, Xiao Xing's expression did not change much. Compared to 3 days ago, his figure was much more illusory as he asked expressionlessly. Just by looking at Xiao Xing's current appearance, everyone could already guess that Xiao Xing would not be able to hold on for much longer. Very soon, he would completely disappear. Standing respectfully in front of Xiao Xing, the sovereign of 10,000 weapons replied, "Saint, all 50,000 people have arrived." At this moment, all 50,000 people had arrived at Heavenly Stellar Mountain. From the peak of Heavenly Stellar Mountain to the foot of the mountain, there were people everywhere. These people were the people who were leaving the Heavenly Stellar Continent and heading to other continents. They were also the Heavenly Stellar Continent's last hope. Looking down at the people below, Xiao Xing's calm voice rang out. It was clearly transmitted to everyone's ears. "I don't need to explain why you are leaving the Heavenly Stellar Continent. This time, I have prepared a place for you called the Heavenly River Continent. After hearing Shao Xing's words, Shao Qin, who was standing at the front of the crowd, asked Chen Ling in a low voice, "Big brother, do you know about the Heavenly River Continent?" "I don't know. I've never heard of it." Chen Ling had never heard of the Heavenly River Continent before. Hearing this, he shook his head and replied. Chen Ling also did not know about the Heavenly River Continent, so it was impossible to learn anything from him. Following this, Shao Qin once again focused on listening to Shao Xing's next words. In actuality, the Heavenly River Continent was a continent that Shao Xing had visited when he was alive. It could be considered the closest continent to the Heavenly Stellar Continent. Moreover, Shao Xing did not break through to the Saint Realm in the Heavenly Stellar Continent, but in the Heavenly River Continent. When Shao Xing was only in the Tao King Realm, he crossed the endless starry sky alone and coincidentally came to the Heavenly River Continent. In the Heavenly River Continent, Shao Xing saw that the martial Tao was more prosperous than that of the Heavenly Stellar Continent. It was in the Heavenly River Continent that Shao Xing finally broke through from the Tao King Realm all the way to the Saint Realm. It could be said that if Shao Xing had not left the Heavenly Stellar Continent, he would not have been able to break through to the Saint Realm because his vision in the Heavenly Stellar Continent was too narrow. It could be said that he was relatively familiar with the Heavenly River Continent. On the Heavenly River Continent, there was more than one Saint Realm expert. Moreover, the entire Heavenly River Continent was many times larger than that of the Heavenly Stellar Continent. Therefore, Shao Xing chose the Heavenly River Continent from the beginning. There were definitely indescribable benefits for everyone's progress. Those with talent who went to the Heavenly River Continent could be said to be like fish in water. He briefly explained his understanding of the Heavenly River Continent to everyone. It was nothing more than the size, the general situation, and the number of saints. Needless to say, compared to the Heavenly Stellar Continent, it was like comparing a river to the sea. As for the general situation, it had to be explained by the number of saints. In Shao Xing's era, there were as many as 18 saints in the Heavenly River Continent. It was precisely because there were so many saints at the same time that the Heavenly River Continent was very chaotic. The various Saint Realm experts attacked each other to seize territory and resources. Compared to the relative peace of the Heavenly Stellar Continent, the Heavenly River Continent was a chaotic world created by saints. If one wanted to survive on the Heavenly River Continent, the only thing one could rely on was one's own strength. Strength was the law and reason on the Heavenly River Continent. Without strength, one could not expect anyone to support you. The law of survival was much harsher than that of the Heavenly Stellar Continent. After listening to Shao Xing's words, the 50,000 people present fell silent. Chapter 340. Everyone was silent. They didn't expect that Shao Xing would send them to such a dangerous place. Originally, it was already difficult for them to accept that the Blood Demon Continent had 9 great demon saints, but now they heard from Shao Xing that the Sky River Continent had a total of 18 great demon saints. Compared to the Sky River Continent, the seemingly invincible Blood Demon Continent was much weaker. This was indeed the case. The strength of the Blood Demon Continent was enough to crush the Heavenly Qin Continent, but the strength of the Sky River Continent was enough to crush the Blood Demon Continent. This was the difference in strength. The fundamental reason for this situation was the prosperity of the martial Tao. To put it bluntly, the martial Tao of the Heavenly Qin Continent had withered to an outrageous degree. It was completely incomparable to the prosperity of the Sky River Continent. Seeing that everyone was silent, Shao Xing said expressionlessly, "If anyone is afraid, you can leave. This saint will not force anyone. After all, you are not going for anyone, but for yourself, for the land under your feet, and for the loved ones behind you. If you want to resist the invasion of the Blood Demon Continent, you must have enough strength. In the Heavenly Qin Continent, let alone 100 years, even if you were given 1,000 years, it would be impossible for a great demon saint to be born. Therefore, even if the Sky River continent is a dragon's pool and a tiger's den, you have no way out. Unless you are willing to be ants under the feet of others, then you can retreat. Moreover, I am not exaggerating. What this saint just said was the situation 3,000 years ago. Now that such a long time has passed, I don't know what the Sky River continent is like. Maybe the great demon saints are almost all dead, or maybe new great demon saints have been born, causing the number of great demon saints to increase. No one can say for sure. Also, during this transmission to the Sky River continent, because of the power of space, you will be forcibly separated. Perhaps some people will gather together after arriving at the Sky River continent, but it is also possible that you will be alone. As for what happens, it will depend on your luck. Well, this saint has said so much. Finally, I will give you 100 breaths of time to consider. If you want to leave the mountain immediately. Don't waste this saint's time. It could be seen that most of the people present had a fear of the Sky River continent in their hearts. They couldn't be blamed for this. People would always instinctively have a fear of unfamiliar things. However, if they went to the Heavenly River continent with fear and resistance, then there was no hope that they would be able to save the Heavenly River continent. This was like an army. Before they even set out, they had already lost their will to fight. Thus, how could one expect this army to win a battle? Shaoxing's words made everyone feel even more uncertain. During the teleportation process, everyone would be separated. Wouldn't that be even more dangerous? Silence. The atmosphere suddenly became heavy. Even Xiao Chen was a little worried. Of course, Xiao Chen was not worried about himself. Xiao Chen was worried about his parents, Qin Shuru and Flower Fairy. Originally, he was going to protect them after going to the Sky River continent, but now it seems that it is impossible. Once they are separated, how can he find them in the Sky River continent? Looking at Qin Shuru and the others, as if he could see through Xiao Chen's thoughts, Chen Ling said softly. The teleportation array between the continents is called the Cross-Realm Teleportation Array. This array already contains the power of space. Under such a long-distance teleportation, it will naturally be irresistibly separated by the power of space. Actually, Shaoxing is right. If you are afraid, you can stay in the Heavenly Chen continent. Little brother, everyone has their own opportunities. Do you think it is good to protect them by your side? I believe that since they have made a decision, they must be mentally prepared. Moreover, how can you be sure that something will happen to them? Maybe they will obtain a heaven-defying opportunity in the Sky River continent. Who can say for sure? He advised Xiao Chen not to worry too much. Whether it was Xiao Qing and Bai Riyue or Qin Shuru and Flower Fairy, was it really a good thing for Xiao Chen to protect them by his side? Little did they know that while Xiao Chen was protecting their safety, he was also strangling their growth. Indeed, as expected of someone who had been reborn, Chen Ling saw many things more clearly than Xiao Chen. Hearing Chen Ling's words, Xiao Chen was silent for a while. Then, he walked over to his parents and Qin Shuru. Looking at the four of them, Xiao Chen asked seriously, "Have you really decided to go to the Sky River continent?" Facing Xiao Chen's question, the four of them nodded without hesitation. Although they were a little nervous, they did not hesitate at all. As for the reason, it was not because of anything else. Whether it was as parents or as wives, their thoughts were very simple. They only hoped to be able to stay by Xiao Chen's side forever. In order to do this, not to mention strength, they had to at least have enough cultivation, because the level of cultivation represented the length of their lifespan. This was especially true for Xiao Qing and Bai Riyue. The two elders knew very well that if they stayed in the Sky River continent, perhaps in 100 years, they would be old men with one foot in the grave. At that time, even if Xiao Chen returned, how long could they accompany Xiao Chen? Time was always the two elders' biggest enemy. If they could not break through to a higher realm, they would turn into a pile of dirt sooner or later. So, why not take a gamble? Knowing their own abilities, Shao Qing and Bai Ruiyue wanted to take a gamble, just to be able to stay by Shao Chen's side a little longer. Shao Chen looked deeply at the four of them. In the end, he said in a deep voice, "Then promise me that you must stay alive." Hearing Shao Chen's words, the four of them nodded heavily. Then, Shao Chen strode to the top of the mountain. He turned around and looked at the 50,000 people lined up at the foot of the mountain. "Everyone, I know you are afraid, but do we have a way out? Even if we retreat now, we can temporarily obtain 100 years of peace. But what about 100 years later? When the power of the array is exhausted and the demon saints of the blood demon continent descend, what can we do? Submit to them and give up the homeland that originally belonged to us, and then offer up our wives and daughters for them to humiliate? Our departure carries the last hope of the Sky River continent. For the land under our feet, for our homeland, for our loved ones, I think that even if it is really a dragon's pool and a tiger's den, we have no reason to retreat, right? That's all I have to say. Everyone, think about it. If you want to retreat, then go down the mountain now. We are going to set off and fight for a future for the Sky River continent." After he finished speaking, Shao Chen turned around and looked at Shao Xing, who was standing proudly in the sky. Shao Xing nodded at Shao Chen with a gratified expression. Chapter 341. Shao Chen's voice resounded throughout the entire heavenly stellar mountain. Hearing Shao Chen's words, the people who were originally afraid felt as if they had been forced into a dead end. As the saying goes, even a rabbit will bite when cornered. Today, the heavenly stellar continent had no way out. Just like what Shao Chen said, even if it was a dragon's lair or a tiger's den, they had no reason to retreat. Because if they retreated, they would definitely die. If they bravely moved forward, they might be able to find a way out. After a moment of silence, a Tao sovereign expert laughed loudly and said, "Haha, this old man has lived for 280 years, yet I am inferior to a child. This is simply too embarrassing. King Bewitching Sword is right. Even if the Tianhe continent is a dragon's lair or a tiger's den, this old man still has to give it a try and kill a way out for the heavenly stellar continent." When this Tao sovereign expert spoke, his face revealed a trace of shame. Compared to Shao Chen, these experts of the older generation had lived like dogs. In the end, they actually needed a junior to boost their courage. Following this Tao sovereign expert's shout, soon, everyone else also spoke up. Indeed, it was no longer a matter of whether they were afraid or not. They simply had no choice. Even if they were afraid, they had to go, or they could only wait for death. For their homeland, for their loved ones, and for their descendants, they had to give it their all. They had to constantly force themselves to grow faster. Only then would they have the strength to face the blood demon continent. That's right. We old men have lived like dogs for so many years. If we stay in the heavenly stellar continent, we will also die. If we go to the Tianhe continent, we can still fight for a future. Everyone, do you still need to think about this? Even if you don't think about us, think about our descendants. I don't want my descendants to become slaves of the blood demon continent in the future. Everyone spoke up one after another. For a moment, the emotions of fear dissipated and were replaced by pairs of eyes filled with madness. They stared fervently at Shao Xing in the sky. Everyone wanted to fight and kill. They wanted to slaughter their way out of the encirclement of the blood devil continent. It was for themselves, for their descendants, and even more so, for the homeland that had raised them. Facing everyone's gaze, Shao Xing's eyes finally flashed with a touch of satisfaction. If this was the case, it would be meaningful for these people to go to the Sky River continent. Shao Xing said softly. "Alright, but before you leave, this saint still has to tell you that if you haven't truly grown up in 100 years, then stay in the Tianhe continent and leave behind some bloodlines for the Tianqian continent. No, if we don't succeed, we'll die trying." As soon as Shao Xing said this, the other sovereigns immediately agreed. Upon hearing the ruler's words, the crowd below bellowed. Succeed or die trying, the angry roar resounded through the sky. Hearing this, Shaoxing smiled slightly. Perhaps these people could really create a miracle. Without saying anything more, a bright golden light erupted from Shaoxing's body. The golden light pierced through the void and formed a huge door of light. This was Shaoxing using his remaining strength to forcefully open up a spatial channel that connected to the Tianhe continent. The spatial channel between continents was called a trans-realm teleportation portal. In order to construct a trans-realm teleportation portal, one had to use some special treasures, such as the blood devil mark used by demonic cultivators. This was also the most orthodox method. However, the Tianhe continent obviously didn't have such treasures right now, so they could only take an unconventional approach and use another method, which was for a saint to destroy their life force and use their lifetime's cultivation to forcefully construct a trans-realm teleportation portal. Back then, the trans-realm teleportation portal of the Blood Devil continent was destroyed by Shaoxing. If one of the great devil saints stood out and sacrificed themselves, it was possible to construct a brand new trans-realm teleportation portal. However, it was obvious that none of the great devil saints were willing to sacrifice themselves. In the entire world, there was probably no saint like Shaoxing who was willing to sacrifice himself to construct a trans-realm teleportation portal. Which saint would do such a foolish thing? Of course, Shaoxing didn't have much time left, so he didn't have a choice. Before he died, he could only leave behind the last hope for the Tianhe continent. However, even though Shaoxing's remaining strength was enough to construct a trans-realm teleportation portal to the Tianhe continent, because Shaoxing was only a wisp of his soul, the portal wasn't stable. As a result, after everyone was teleported to the Tianhe continent, they might appear in any corner of the Tianhe continent. At the same time, the portal wouldn't exist for long and would disappear in a day at most. Of course, he was able to do this because Shaoxing's cultivation far exceeded that of an ordinary saint. He could already be considered a half-step saint. Otherwise, an ordinary saint wouldn't be able to construct a trans-realm teleportation portal with just a wisp of his soul. When the portal of the trans-realm teleportation portal was formed, Shaoxing's figure disappeared into the horizon. Only his voice came from the portal. Enter as soon as possible. This portal can only last for a day at most. Let's go. You are the hope of the Tianhe continent. Don't let this saint down, and don't let down all the people of the Tianhe continent who are waiting for your return. After saying this, Shaoxing's voice slowly dissipated. Along with it, Shaoxing's aura dissipated. Obviously, Shaoxing had left and completely disappeared. At the last moment, he had exhausted the last of his strength to plant a seed of hope for the Tianhe continent. Looking at the portal of light in front of him, Shaoxing stood in front of the crowd and bowed respectfully. Seeing this, the 50,000 people behind him also bowed. They thanked Shaoxing and at the same time admired Shaoxing. This was a peerless saint who cared for the entire Tianhe continent. Even if he died, he still didn't forget to protect the Tianhe continent. He was worthy of the title of Tianhe continent's protector. After bowing, the rulers immediately arranged for everyone to step into the portal of light. Shaoxing accompanied Qin Shiru, Hundred Flower Fairy, Zhang Jingxiang, and Shao Qing. Although he knew that everyone might be separated during the teleportation process, he still wanted to be with them at the last moment. When you go to the Tianhe continent, you must be very careful. Don't act rashly. Staying alive is the most important thing. I will find you. When it was Shaoxing and the others turned to step into the portal of light, Shaoxing said this seriously to the four of them. Hearing Shaoxing's words, the four of them nodded heavily. Just as they were about to step into the portal of light, Shaoxing gave one last warning to the four of them. Then he turned his head to look at the proud kings, Long Qing and Chen Ling behind him, and a smile appeared on his face. Big brother, second sister, brothers, see you on the Tianhe continent. See you on the Tianhe continent. Hearing Xiao Chen's words, everyone laughed loudly. Then, Xiao Chen led Qin Shuru and the others through the portal of light. Chapter 342. Xiao Chen led Qin Shuru and the other three through the golden door. For a moment, everyone's vision darkened. At the same time, they felt as if their bodies were about to be sucked dry. The world spun, and their consciousness gradually began to fade. Vaguely, everyone seemed to see a sky full of stars streaking past them. Compared to the traditional cross-realm transmission array, Shaoxing's transmission array was obviously not very stable. Therefore, during the transmission process, everyone had to endure some pain. They didn't last long at all. Soon, Xiao Chen fell into a coma. In a state of unconsciousness, everyone's hands, which were originally tightly clasped together, unconsciously loosened. Many people were like this. Not long after entering the transmission array, they fainted. Perhaps only the rulers were able to stay awake for the entire transmission process. Even the supreme masters of the Tao sovereign realm would fall into a coma after a while. The cross-realm transmission array was an array that used the power of space to connect two different continents. The power of space was extremely mysterious. Even a saint couldn't comprehend it. It could only be said that it borrowed the power of space. Therefore, because of the power of space, even though the heavenly Chen continent and the heavenly river continent were very far apart, the cross-realm transmission array could reach them in less than an hour. On the heavenly stellar mountain, everyone entered the golden door one after another. After everyone had entered, the rulers looked at each other and then strode through the door. On this day, the heavenly stellar mountain shone with a golden light. Everywhere in the heavenly Qin continent, everyone's eyes were fixed on the heavenly stellar mountain. They all knew what would happen today. The entire heavenly Qin continent's powerhouses and geniuses would leave the heavenly Qin continent for a whole new world. And this time they would be gone for at least 100 years. Moreover, these people carried the fate of the entire heavenly Qin continent on their shoulders. Their success or failure would directly determine the fate of the heavenly Qin continent. Everyone on the heavenly Qin continent prayed for these 50,000 warriors. They hoped that they could grow up safely on the heavenly river continent and protect the heavenly Qin continent in the future. Not long after the sovereigns entered the door of light, the door of light slowly dissipated. Shaoxing disappeared along with it. 50,000 people had already left. At the same time, in the unfamiliar land of the heavenly river continent, on this day, there were many unconscious cultivators of the heavenly river continent appearing everywhere. They appeared in the wilderness, in cities, and even directly in some sects. These people seemed to have appeared out of thin air. However, the appearance of so many warriors from the heavenly Qin continent naturally attracted the attention of some forces. There were indeed too many people, and they appeared together. Naturally, it attracted the attention of many people. While the Tianhe continent was being attacked by these strangers, Xiao Chen was lying on top of a huge rock with his eyes closed. He was surrounded by a vast plain, on which there were a few strange rocks standing in groups of 2s and 3s. After being unconscious for an unknown period of time, Xiao Chen slowly opened his eyes. He shook his dizzy head and looked around at the unfamiliar environment. Immediately, Xiao Chen thought of Qin Shuru and the others. He immediately got up and began to look around. It had to be said that Xiao Chen was lucky because there were dozens of unconscious heavenly Qin continent cultivators around him. These people were all transmitted here with him. In other words, Xiao Chen was not completely alone. At least, there were some trustworthy people around him. In a foreign land, his compatriots from the heavenly Qin continent were obviously the most trustworthy people. There was no doubt about this. However, after searching for a while, Xiao Chen did not find the figures of Qin Shuru and the others. In other words, everyone was forcibly separated. In the vast Sky River continent, Xiao Chen did not know where Qin Shuru and the others were now and how far away they were from him. He sighed helplessly. Although he had been mentally prepared, Xiao Chun still had a trace of fantasy in his heart. However, this fantasy was now mercilessly shattered. The facts were already in front of him. There was no other way. He could only establish a foothold in the Sky River continent first and then look for the whereabouts of the four people. Xiao Chun tried to wake up the dozens of unconscious people around him. Among these people, there were some that Xiao Chun recognized and some that he did not. There were old and young people, and their cultivation levels were high and low. There were two super experts in the Dao Sovereign Realm. Xiao Chun had seen them before. One of them was the Deputy Valley Master of the Heavenly Dan Valley, and the other was the Deputy Pavilion Master of the Myriad Weapon Pavilion. In addition to these two super experts, there were also four Dao King Realm experts. As for the rest, there were Dao Querying Realm, Dao Confirming Realm, and Dao Transformation Realm experts. In the end, Xiao Chun even found 6 young geniuses. These 6 people were not geniuses from Nine Cloud Palace, nor were they his guests. They were not familiar with him, but Xiao Chun recognized them. To be able to send so many people to the Sky River continent, Xiao Chun's luck was obviously good. As these people woke up one by one, everyone soon knew that they had successfully arrived at the Sky River continent. They were lucky enough to be sent together. However, in this strange foreign land, and with no one knowing anything about this place, it was obviously the best choice at this time. Just as they were about to discuss what to do next, a figure rapidly descended from the sky. It was so fast that no one had time to react. However, when they saw the appearance of the person who had descended, they were immediately overjoyed. Sky-scorching ruler. That's right, the person who came was the burning sky ruler. He was also sent here with everyone. However, because the burning sky ruler was a Dao Emperor Realm expert, he did not fall unconscious during the teleportation process. After arriving at the Sky River continent, the burning sky ruler saw that everyone was still unconscious, so he walked around alone to familiarize himself with the surroundings and prepare for the next step. With a ruler by their side, everyone was naturally overjoyed. This way, at least their safety was guaranteed. In the face of everyone's greetings, the burning sky ruler waved his hand and said, "This is not the Sky River continent. In the future, there is no need to call me ruler. You have just woken up, so rest first. Xiao Chun, come with me." After coming to the Sky River continent, the burning sky ruler had already abandoned his pride as a ruler. Here, he wasn't a ruler and he couldn't decide anything. At most, he could only be regarded as a powerhouse. It must be known that in the Sky River continent, the people who could decide the fate of the Sky River continent were the high and mighty saints. As soon as his voice fell, the burning sky ruler did not wait for anyone to reply. He called Xiao Chun and walked towards a nearby place. Obviously, he had something to say to Xiao Chun. 4th update, please bookmark, please recommend. Chapter 343. He called Xiao Chun to the side. To be honest, Xiao Chun wasn't very familiar with the burning sky ruler. Among the remaining 8 rulers of the heavenly Qin continent, Xiao Chun was most familiar with the 9 clouds ruler and the pill cloud ruler, followed by the heavenly pill ruler. After all, she was the pill cloud ruler's wife, and could be considered his master's wife. He didn't have much contact with the burning sky ruler. Xiao Chun only knew that he was Huangfu Ao's father. To be honest, even the heavenly wood ruler was relatively familiar with him. Xiao Chun didn't know why the burning sky ruler had called him over, so he followed behind him. When the burning sky ruler stopped, Xiao Chun bowed and said, "Lord Ruler, do you have any orders?" "I've already said that there's no need to call me Overlord. This isn't the heavenly Qin continent anymore, and the word Overlord is too sensitive. Not to mention that I'm only at the Dao Emperor realm, so how could I bear the title of Overlord? It was us old fellows who were too ignorant and narrow-minded. If you don't mind, just call me Uncle Tian in the future." "Alright, let's not talk about this for now. I have something to tell you," the burning sky ruler said calmly when he heard Xiao Chun's words. From his words and expression, It wasn't difficult to see that he had completely let go of the title of ruler. After speaking, the Burning Sky ruler paused for a moment. He didn't wait for Xiao Chen to reply and quickly continued. Now that we have arrived at the Heavenly River continent, tell me what you think. What should we do next? The Burning Sky ruler actually asked Xiao Chen for his opinion. Hearing this, Xiao Chen naturally didn't think that the Burning Sky ruler asked him because he didn't have any ideas. He thought that the Burning Sky ruler just wanted to see what choice he should make in this situation. The Burning Sky ruler obviously had some plans in mind. In this regard, Xiao Chen didn't rashly give an answer. Instead, he calmly asked, "Uncle Tian, did you walk around the area just now?" "That's right." The Burning Sky ruler nodded and replied when he heard Xiao Chen's words. "Uncle Tian, you should have some understanding of the surrounding situation, right?" Xiao Chen continued. Without knowing where they were, Xiao Chen would naturally not make a rash decision. After being questioned by Xiao Chen twice in a row, the Burning Sky ruler did not show the slightest displeasure. On the contrary, the corners of his mouth revealed a faint smile. He then explained the situation he knew to Xiao Chen. According to what Burning Sky Sovereign said, everyone should be in a plain. This plain was extremely vast, and even Burning Sky Sovereign couldn't walk out of it. Moreover, the surrounding area was desolate and uninhabited. There were no villages or towns. Of course, the reason why the Burning Sky ruler didn't walk out of this plain wasn't because it was boundless. Instead, it was because the Burning Sky ruler didn't dare to walk too far. After all, everyone was still unconscious before. If they encountered a monster beast or a martial artist from the Sky River continent, it would be very dangerous. Therefore, when the Burning Sky ruler went out, he basically circled around within 100 miles of everyone and didn't really go far. There wasn't the slightest trace of human habitation within 100 miles. It could be said that the Burning Sky ruler didn't have the slightest information. After listening to the Burning Sky ruler's introduction, Xiao Chen slightly exhorted for a moment, then gave his answer. "Uncle Tian, we have just arrived at the Sky River continent. It can be said that we know nothing about the Sky River continent. I think we should find a town first. On the one hand, we can understand the situation of the Sky River continent. On the other hand, we can take a little rest and plan for our future actions. It's better than being randomly bumped around." Xiao Chen's choice was based on stability. He didn't have the slightest intention of taking risks. After all, they were now in a completely unfamiliar continent. Acting rashly was definitely an extremely dangerous thing. It must be known that although everyone was together with the Burning Sky ruler, this was the Sky River continent. The Burning Sky ruler wasn't an invincible existence. Not to mention a saint, as long as a half-step saint descended, the Burning Sky ruler wouldn't be his opponent. Hearing Xiao Chen's words, the Burning Sky ruler smiled and nodded. "Yes, you think the same as me. In fact, I was just thinking that you little guys would be flustered after being suddenly sent to the Sky River continent. But now it seems that I was thinking too much. You are much more experienced than I thought." The Burning Sky ruler was very satisfied with Xiao Chen's answer. In fact, before leaving the Sky River continent, these rulers had already discussed it. In the Sky River continent, their first task was naturally to break through to the Saint Realm. However, the Saint Realm was too illusory. While looking for a way to break through to the Saint Realm, these rulers also had another task, and that was to protect Xiao Chen and the other proud monarch. Now that they were teleported together with Xiao Chen, the Burning Sky ruler naturally had to assume the responsibility of protecting Xiao Chen. The reason why the Burning Sky ruler asked Xiao Chen what to do next was that he wanted to see whether Xiao Chen could remain calm in the face of such a situation. Just like how Xiao Chen didn't understand the Burning Sky ruler, the Burning Sky ruler also didn't understand Xiao Chen. It had to be said that Xiao Chen's performance made the Burning Sky ruler very satisfied. After chatting with Xiao Chen for a while, about a quarter of an hour later, The Burning Sky ruler brought Xiao Chen back to everyone. Looking at the dozens of people, the Burning Sky ruler said in a deep voice, "How is it? Have all of you recovered?" Hearing the Burning Sky ruler's words, the Celestial Dan Valley Vice Valley Master stood up and respectfully replied, reporting to the Burning Sky ruler, "We are all fine and can set off at any time." Hearing the Celestial Dan Valley Vice Valley Master's reply, the Burning Sky ruler calmly replied, "I already said that in the future, don't call me ruler. You can call me Lord. The word ruler is too sensitive, so don't call me that in the future. Alright, since you've rested, let's set off and find a city to stay in as soon as possible." With that, the Burning Sky ruler led the way, and everyone began their journey in the Sky River continent. Along the way, because Xiao Chen and the other younger generation hadn't broken through to the Tao querying realm, they couldn't fly. In addition, they weren't familiar with the place, so flying was too conspicuous. So everyone chose to walk. Choosing to walk made it easier to hide their tracks, but correspondingly, their speed was much slower. After finding a direction, everyone headed east. It had to be said that this plain was really big. For an entire day and night they didn't walk out. Until noon of the second day, the group was still moving according to the established route. Suddenly, from the front of the group, over 100 figures flew through the air and quickly arrived in front of the group. Then, accompanied by a sneer from the leader, over 100 figures immediately surrounded the group. "Haha, we caught a big fish. With so many people, there must be a lot of gains. Brothers, surround them and take the storage rings in their hands." Fifth update, please bookmark, please recommend. Chapter 344. Following the leader's shout, more than 100 cultivators in black martial attire surrounded Xiao Chen and the others. Surrounded by these people, Xiao Chen and the others' eyes flashed with a cold light. Judging from the clothes and temperament of these people, they were obviously not disciples of any sect or clan. They were more like a group of bandits. That's right, they were the kind of bandits who occupied a mountain and lived by robbing others. They didn't expect that the first group of people they met in the Heavenly River continent would be a group of bandits. The reason why these people became bandits was that they didn't have any background, and their talent wasn't outstanding. They didn't have any background, and the major sects weren't willing to accept them. Therefore, they became bandits. Therefore, bandits generally didn't have strong combat strength. They were people who had been eliminated. They had no choice but to be the guards of the major sects, so they became bandits. It wasn't that there weren't any bandits in the Heavenly Chen continent, but because of Xiao Chen's identity, the bandits didn't dare to provoke him. So, Xiao Chen had never met any bandit. Who would have thought that as soon as they arrived in the Heavenly River continent, they would encounter a group of bandits? It was funny. Their identities were indeed high in the Heavenly Chen continent, but in the Heavenly River continent, they were worthless. Even bandits dared to block their way. After surrounding them, the leader of the bandits sneered as he looked at Xiao Chen and the others. This group of people was very pitiful. They just had to meet Xiao Chen and the others. They were not strong to begin with. Among the many bandits, the one with the highest cultivation was naturally the leader. However, he was only at the Tao confirmation realm, which was pitifully weak. With such cultivation, there was no need for the Burning Sky Sovereign to act. Any Tao King realm powerhouse could easily suppress them. Unfortunately, the bandit leader had yet to realize that a calamity was about to befall them. He was naturally unable to see through the cultivation levels of powerhouses like the Burning Sky ruler and the others. As for Xiao Chen and the others, they were only at the Sky realm. Why would the bandit leader care about them? Moreover, they didn't fly along the way. They couldn't even fly. The bandit leader naturally treated them as a group of lambs waiting to be slaughtered. Haha, we're really lucky today. I didn't expect to meet such a group of fat sheep. Brothers, let's deal with them and take their storage rings. The bandit leader laughed as he looked at the storage rings in everyone's hands. Xiao Chen and the others all had storage rings. It was obviously a huge harvest. Hearing their leader's words, the bandits all prepared to attack. Burning Sky Ruler said indifferently, "Someone, take care of them. But I want the leader alive." He didn't put the bandits in his eyes at all. What a joke. Although everyone was a little afraid and nervous about the Sky River continent, that was only against the top forces of the Sky River continent. Those were the great forces with Saint. Apart from these great forces, a group of small bandits dared to provoke them. They were simply courting death. It should be known that although the heavenly Chun continent's martial arts had withered, it wasn't a place that a group of bandits could provoke. The people who went to the Sky River continent this time were the top group of people in the heavenly Chun continent. Therefore, dealing with a group of bandits was like playing a game. Hearing the Burning Sky Ruler's words, a Tao King Realm powerhouse consciously stepped forward. He didn't waste any time and directly struck out with his palm. As his attack landed, a unique aura of a Tao King Realm powerhouse soared into the sky from his body. He stopped concealing his aura. Only at this moment did the expression of the bandit leader, who had been sneering all this time, suddenly change drastically. He felt disgusted, as if he had swallowed a fly, and he stared fixedly at the Tao King, who attacked as he spoke in disbelief. A Tao King Realm powerhouse. This. He didn't expect that the group of people he thought were sheep waiting to be slaughtered would casually step forward with a Tao King Realm cultivation. At this point, no matter how stupid the bandit leader was, he probably realized that he had kicked an iron plate. His expression changed drastically and turned ashen. However, it was too late to say anything now. He didn't give the bandits any time to react at all. The Tao King Realm powerhouse attacked repeatedly. He dealt with over 100 bandits alone, but the battle was a one-sided massacre. It was the bandits' fault for provoking Xiao Chen's group. They were too weak. Even the bandit leader was only a Tao Confirmation Realm cultivator, let alone the other bandit. In less than 10 minutes, over 100 bandits were slaughtered by the Tao King Realm powerhouse. According to the Burning Sky Ruler, the Tao King Realm powerhouse didn't kill the bandit leader. Instead, he carried the bandit leader to the Burning Sky Ruler like a chicken and threw him to the ground. Then, the Tao King Realm powerhouse respectfully said to the Burning Sky Ruler, "My lord, it's all done." Hearing this, the Burning Sky Ruler softly grunted in acknowledgement. Then, he strode over to the bandit leader and looked down at him condescendingly. "I ask and you answer. Do you understand? If I'm not satisfied with your answer, I'll make you wish you were dead." The bandit leader was completely scared out of his wit. When he heard the Burning Sky Ruler's words, he immediately nodded like a chicken pecking at rice. His eyes were filled with fear. It didn't take much effort for the bandit leader to answer all of the Burning Sky Ruler's questions. In the end, when the Burning Sky Ruler saw that he couldn't get any valuable information out of him, he flicked his finger and ended the bandit leader's life. After casually dealing with a group of bandits, everyone learned some useful information from them. First of all, the entire Sky River continent was divided into 4 prefectures, 18 mansions, and 100 counties. In other words, there were 100 counties in the entire Sky River continent. Above the 100 counties were 18 mansions. In the end, the 4 prefectures led the entire Sky River continent. At the same time, everyone was currently in Danyang County, one of the 100 counties. Above Danyang County was the Tianfeng Mansion, which belonged to the ancient Saint Province. After learning everyone's current location, the Burning Sky Ruler also learned that there was a city called Moontrace City about a day's journey ahead. It could be said that they had obtained a lot of useful information from the bandit leader. However, it was a pity that the bandit leader only knew this much. He didn't know anything about the sacred clans, sacred empires, or sacred sect. However, this couldn't be blamed on him. With his status, he obviously couldn't come into contact with that level. Let's go to Moontrace City first. With this information, the Burning Sky Ruler immediately decided to head to Moontrace City first. There, they could obtain more information. At the same time, it could also allow everyone to rest and adapt to the environment of the Sky River continent. 6th update. Please bookmark, please recommend. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.